Audacity.
Oh, we'll have to do that. Hello, we are live. Welcome everybody to another live episode of Keeping Karlsson, a special live episode where we're going to be going a little bit off script and doing a mid-season Schmore Goalies board. Thanks so much for joining us. Hey Brian, how's it going? Oh, grab another bite. Brian's going to grab one last bite of his dinner. Hungry boy.
Well, maybe not my last. We'll see how many I can sneak in. But hello, friends. Hello, family.
It's like as I'm like saying hello, it's clearly about to happen that I'm about to introduce you. That's when you like decide to like, I see your head go down, try to scoop in that last bite. Okay, this is great.
I'm just, no. Hey,
remember when you had that whole initiative of like wanting us to become like really serious about video, and you were like talking to John about like setting up a whole video? I guess now since we decided not to move forward with that,
this wasn't part of it.
Right? Yeah. Since we decided not to go forward with that, now we can just be chill.
I would never agree to any video situation that doesn't let me to eat on camera.
Okay, I would never agree to seriously promoting our videos that have you eating on camera. So we might be at a standstill.
It's nice to see showing up in the chat already. We've got 4, which is great because Elon and I, before we came on the air, were just like, how many people are we going to talk to tonight?
Yeah,
because we'll talk about it on the show, but things are goo goo gaga.
Yeah, we don't want to spoil it. The fact that Hawk Fantasy is weird right now. All right, so Brian, ready to start the recording?
Yeah, let me have one last bite here.
Okay, make sure to get that bite, get your energy up.
You didn't even ask what I'm eating.
Whatever, some pasta of sorts.
Yeah.
Okay, very good. All right, so
I would want to know more, but that's okay. You don't.
I mean, it's always pasta.
I respect that.
I mean, we're live on the air right now. Like, people are here to watch us talk about hockey, so I didn't want to do the pasta chat. That's for the Patron Cast on Tuesday. Someone put it down right now in December Patron Cast questions. What was Brian eating?
I mean, it's just a way to bridge the gap between now and when we're recording.
Oh,
we have a lot of requests to talk about pasta on the show.
Pasternak, you mean?
Oh,
I just traded
him. That's what they mean.
All right, so Brian, let's start the recording.
That was ridiculous. I hope you saw my eye roll as you mentioned that.
You wrote an eye roll on the league chat, or just now? You're saying?
No, just to you. I physically rolled my eyes.
Look,
you
man.
know, the old. I emoted the old-fashioned way.
You know that right away. I got the trade offer. I think it could go either way. Anyways, we'll talk about it later. But I definitely was like thinking like I'm probably
going to go either way.
Pasta. Okay, for everyone listening, I got offered. So again, this isn't me like going out and get a deal, right? I'm just sitting minding my own business. A lot like the time that I thought I had traded an HS for Troy Terry. That's a whole other situation because there's no counter offers in this league. I was offered Zibanejad and Patrick Kane for Pasternak and Jack Hughes, and it's a keeper league, right? So I got 2 people in late 20s and early 30s for 2, obviously younger, but I think I accepted it because I feel like Zibanejad and Patrick Kane have higher upside than obviously Jack Hughes, at least for the next couple of years. But you never know. I do like Jack. Like, the thing is, the 2 guys I traded, I like a lot. Like, it's just like I got an offer that I couldn't refuse.
So do I. But you know what I like even more?
What?
The 2 guys you got.
Yeah. We'll see. I guess Patrick Kane's like 33. So I'm curious, like, how slowly he regresses. I'd imagine in like 4 years, he's like, I'd imagine Pasternak and Zibanejad maybe are somewhat similar now and in 4 years. And so the big question is, how much better is Jack Hughes than Patrick Kane? Like, how quickly does that happen? I think we all agree Jack Hughes will be better than Patrick Kane at some point, but is that in like a year, 2 years, 4 years? That's the question. Because this league, by the way, you can only keep people for 4 years. So anyway, I'd imagine the person that traded, I know who it was Mason. I'm assuming Mason is thinking in the future and thinking Jack Hughes is the real deal. I just felt like Jack Hughes is like, I like him a lot, but he's not a sure thing. Like, I think he's going to be a star.
I think he's going to be, real good. I just think in the 4 years that he'll be keepable versus Patrick Kane. I think I'd prefer Patrick Kane for at least 2 of those.
Yeah. All right. Anyways, let's start the recording here. We do have a lot to get to. So, Brian, are you ready to do that?
Yes.
Okay. So I'll count down.
Yeah.
3, 2, 1. Record.
Recording. Okay. Yes. Record. Ding, 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 ding.
It's brilliant.
Thanks.
Okay.
Anyway, just a little thanks again to everyone who's come to join us in the chat tonight. We really appreciate your company. It's been a hard week, but we're all in this together. And anyone who's listening and you're not in the chat, Ryan, Mike, Shams is Elon's favorite part of the show. Kevin.
Well, I'm just glad that it's not part of the actual show and just part of this part of the show.
Minnesota, John, thanks. All right, I'm ready to get started, Elon.
Yeah, feel free also, everyone, if you want to just a sneak peek here, by watching live, you get to know the goalie tiers.
Oh, damn.
KeepingKarlsson.com/goalies if you want to look ahead and give us your thoughts as we go. But okay, here we go. All right, here we go. Welcome, everybody, to another episode of the Keeping Karlsson Fantasy Hockey Podcast.
Wait, Elon,
the longest running fantasy hockey podcast.
Elon, if we ever needed your energy, we need it right now. Can you summon it? I know it's been a really hard week, but please dig deep.
All right, can't stop the music. Start the music again. All right, well, I guess then I don't want to go another 30 seconds. All right, let's start the music like close to the part where I come in. Okay, here we go. Yes! Welcome everybody to another episode of the Keeping Karlsson Fantasy Hockey Podcast, the longest running fantasy hockey podcast in the world, hosted by two guys who have no idea which games are going to be played next week, so we're just going to talk about goalies. I am your host, Elon Dubrowski, and with me, as always, to go over every single goalie in the NHL and put them into tiers, it is my co-host, my very good friend, and the fantasy hockey robot himself, Brian Com.
Hello, Elon. Hello, everyone. And everyone, just give yourselves a pat on the back for having made it through the last day, week. I mean, hey, maybe beyond this week, things have been tough. Give yourself a pat on the back. It's a good time of year to do that, for tolerating all that's gone on, for still doing the best you can for your fantasy team, and for being here with us on Keeping Karlsson to figure out what the heck comes next. As Elon mentioned, there's a lot we don't know about what comes next. So we're actually going to do a little bit of a pivot to a mid-season Schmore goalies board, which we've done before. This is not desperation. This is kind of on the schedule anyway, but this is something that will probably have a little more time-lasting power than trying to figure out any depth chart changes happening from every single last-minute change to the schedule and roster due to what's happening with COVID and its impact on the NHL.
Yeah, exactly. Like, sure, I could be like, Boone Jenner is on the COVID protocol, so Brian, who's going to be the new top power play center in Columbus? But it's like, what's the point, right? Like, maybe that game against Buffalo on Monday is going to get canceled by the time we release this show. Maybe whoever we talk about is going to go on the COVID protocol. So it just feels like at this point, why go through talking about specific players, even on like hot streaks and cold streaks, just because like so much can change before the episode even gets released. So we figured we're going to do a really quick news section to start the show. Then we're going to do a Schmore goalies board where we're going to, again, put every single goalie into tiers. And this is something we're not going to think about COVID, right? We're just going to be like assuming all the goalies that are in COVID protocol will be out of COVID protocol in a week or two. Hopefully there's still NHL games happening. Then you're going to want to make decisions about, do you add a goalie, dropping some other goalie? Do you make a trade? And the whole idea is going to be like, if we say that we think a goalie is in a higher tier than another goalie, that means that, yeah, if you have a tier 4 goalie on your team and we talk about a tier 3 goalie that's in your free agency, that's a swap we're recommending you make. And same for a trade. And we'll get to that in just a sec. Of course, a couple things. First of all, Keeping Karlsson very proudly presented by DauberHockey.com. They don't care that games are getting canceled. They're going to keep churning out the content, and they're doing a really great job covering everything going on. They've got those daily ramblings, all the tools at Frozen Tools keep getting updated. It's just an amazing site. So that's DauberHockey.com. Then yeah, Brian, like I said, I guess we're going to do some news. Maybe first, Shams, one of our awesome patrons and the keeper of a lot of our awesome Twitter accounts, Game Day News NHL, Game Day Goalies, Game Day Lions, really helpful there. So Shams is the best. He wanted us to discuss like how to look forward to this next fantasy matchup, assuming there's going to be games, assuming Yahoo doesn't cancel it. For most people playing on Yahoo, the next matchup is a 2-week matchup. And the way Yahoo works is if you've set your league up to have 4 ads per week, it's actually 4 moves per matchup. So that means that you're only going to have 4 ads over the next 2 weeks. Add to that the complication of you add a player, games might get canceled. So like, what's the strategy here? So I have a couple notes to share of like my thoughts on how to make use of your 4 moves over the next 2 weeks. And then Brian, I guess you could comment after. I wrote a few notes here. So first of all, don't grab a player early because of an appealing schedule. Like Dave Betton, by the way, released a Stream Scheme episode today. It's the mid-season ad buy low, sell high extravaganza. It's not like a typical looking at the schedule for good reason. Like, don't look and be like, oh, this guy's got 2 games next week and Detroit like has all their games canceled. So I definitely want to grab this guy because that whatever guy you're looking at, that person's games may also be canceled. So don't even look at the schedule. Try to save your moves to replace openings on your roster. So if you like right now have a full roster and don't have any open spots due to someone moving to IR, just count yourself lucky and don't be like, oh, but my guy's on a cold streak. I want to drop him for someone on a hot streak. Like, don't bother. because you're going to need your moves to replace players that go in the COVID protocol. When adding a player, wait as late as possible to add them, right? Don't add them the morning of, because they might go on the COVID protocol or their game may get canceled. So if the game's at 7, set an alarm on your phone for like 6:30 and then add the player at that time, assuming that the game is still happening. And then finally, the last piece of advice I'll give is if you're somehow lucky enough to like have a full roster and a player eligible to come out of your IR, don't drop someone to make room for that player to come out of your IR. I would highly not recommend that. Very likely someone new will become IR eligible soon, opening up a spot. So better to just leave the player in IR, assuming your league allows you to, right? But like, even if he's healthy, leave him in IR. Maybe you'll miss a game, but probably not more than one, because eventually you'll be able to swap him for someone else and not have to drop anyone. So those are my like 4 little pieces of advice. We had patrons, by the way, who were sad because they dropped someone to bring in Nicholas Backstrom, and then he like went in the COVID protocol like the next day. And I was like, man, should have just left Backstrom in IR. So it's that kind of thing. So, okay, Brian, any other thoughts about Shams' question about how to use your 4 ads next matchup?
Well, mine are less strategic and more about self-care, which actually, Elon, I think you're emerging here as the fantasy hockey robot, which we might have known all along, but like, because you're all this technical stuff. I mean, this will set an alarm before the game. Like, that's huge. That's what you do for goalie starts, right? That's what I do for goalie starts. Often, especially for teams that wait so long to announce them, you kind of have to do that with every player start now. So I think that's a really good one and actionable. But I would actually just dial it back just a second. And before you think about how to strategically manage this, acknowledge and accept that you can't. Like, you can still do the best you can, yes. But a lot of things that are happening right now in the NHL, in hockey, in the world, on your fantasy roster are out of your control right now. And you have permission to lose or win without having to own it, to put it on your shoulders and say, oh, if only I had known this crazy, unpredictable thing would have happened. You couldn't have known. So my advice is just don't beat yourself up. That's the start. Have some fun as much as you can. Like, I got wrecked by Brett, my tier 2 opponent, this week in the Cupful. It's the Keeping Karlsson Ultimate Patron Fantasy League, kkupfl.com. And, I didn't really mind. I just had some moves and I didn't know what to do with them. And my idea was basically to look at my roster and think, okay, I'm not going to use a move to try and compete this week because I have no idea what's going to happen. And I don't think it's going to come down to that move. Thankfully, it didn't. Also, I was already way down in games played. Like, this was it was looking like a schedule loss and also a roster loss. Brett's roster is really strong. Mine was already beaten up coming into the week. So what I did is I held on to my moves and I just tried to imagine what my team looks like beyond this period of uncertainty, not to lose sight of that, and just tried to use whatever moves I had to just try and find the best player available. Like, forget the other considerations that are usually, are they playing on off nights? Are they playing a lot this week? Are they playing early this week? What's their schedule like in the playoffs? I put that all aside. I'm just like, who's going to be the best player for whenever games are happening? And that's how I tried to use my moves with that long-term look. I wouldn't be working too hard to try and figure things out in the short term, because again, everything can go sideways. You can try and plan for the short term, and then it's just not going to work out unless you are setting your alarm for 2 minutes before puck drop and all your decisions rest just on those games that are all starting at the same time at like 7 ET. So that's one piece. Don't try and chase good line mates and a change in deployment, because there's change and then there's a change on that change and a change on that change. And then I'll also just say, don't feel bad about holding injured players. Just don't. Like, your IR spots are overflowing. You don't need to rush to drop someone because they don't fit in your IR right now.
Right, because Brian is going to swoop in and take that player because Brian is thinking more long term. So you might have other people in your league that have just decided, like you're saying, Brian, like, give up on the matchup. Let me try to get the best players. All of a sudden you're thinking, no one's going to add Mikhail Granlund because he's on the COVID protocol, and then someone might, and then you might regret having lost him.
Exactly. So like, we're in this period of instability where we don't know what's going to happen. And like, you know what, maybe this is foolish. This is just the way that I feel like I can approach this. We can all do what we can sort of mentally and emotionally handle right now. And my feeling is just I'm not going to try and predict the near future. I'm going to make some good moves that are long-term for my team and just accept that I may or may not win the next couple of weeks, but I'm going to try and put myself in a position to win all the future weeks where I think things will hopefully be a little more stable. But going back to the start, just do what works for you. If you're used to dialing in on 100 in fantasy and it's crushing you because you can't control it, dial it back a bit. Or if that's still what you need to do, still do it. Just don't beat yourself up for what happens. Have fun and tweet at us if you need a pep talk. We're here for you.
Yeah. Okay. A 280 character pep talk or whatever that is. Or, we have the vent channel in our Discord server for people to just complain about things. And people have been using it very well recently and for good reason. Okay. So that's some general tips. Great thoughts from you, Brian. I guess, it depends which way you want to go. Definitely the self-care part is very important. And also thinking long-term could also be strategic, right? Okay. So then we'll do a quick news section here. There's 3 news items I just wanted to get your takes on. So first of all, Mark Stone is out today with an upper body injury. This one I don't even want to take from you. I just wanted to mention it because there's a break coming up soon. Who knows? He might be back soon. Just to remind people that when Mark Stone is out, Evgeny Dadonov takes his spot on the line with Pacioretty and Chandler Stevenson. So if it turns out that Mark Stone is out longish term, you may want to look at Evgeny Dadonov. I don't even know. I don't have a question for you. Do you want to comment on that at all?
No, I mean Dadonov has looked nice in little bits and pieces here and there. So I'm very happy that he can get opportunity almost so we can just see what he's going to do with it. But he's been worth a look in, deep-ish leagues when he's had good turns of deployment. And even when he hasn't, he's done some decent production from the third line at times. So I'm just, any way that we can see more of Dadonov in a top line role that's not in Ottawa where it just wasn't working out. I'm curious just to find out more about the player.
Okay, yeah, so that's one piece of advice. But again, Mark Stone may be fine. Hopefully he is. Okay, in Buffalo, Tage Thompson is injured, may be back even by Monday's game if there is a Monday game. But regardless, the Sabres do have some reinforcements coming in because Alex Tuch is slated to make his preseason debut tomorrow on Monday, which is kind of exciting, right? He was a big piece of the return in the Jack Eichel trade, and we've seen him have some good seasons in Vegas, right? Last season, he had 33 points in 55 games. It's a 49-point pace. 3 seasons ago, he had 52 points in 74 games, which is a 58-point pace. That was a year where Vegas had some injuries, and so they had to bring Alex Tuch to actually play on a good line. So we've seen when Tuch is given good deployment, he has the skill to flourish. Now he goes to Buffalo, where I'm not sure about his line mates. In today's practice, Tuch was lining up with Dylan Cousins and a guy named Brett Murray, who I'm not even going to ask you who is Brett Murray, but he's a player on the team that's been playing with Okposo through a lot of Okposo's hot streak. But anyway, so Tuch's going to maybe not have the best line mates, so Dylan Cousins is pretty good, but he might get primo deploymento in terms of minutes, in terms of power play deployment. I think that, considering what they gave up for him, they must think of him as a key player on the team. So who knows if he has any rust or whatever, but he's someone that if he's available in my free agency, I'd be very interested to take a swing on Alex Tuch. What do you think?
Me too, because all of Alex Tuch's career, the line on him has been, if only he got a chance to play in the top 6, we could really see what he's capable of. And that happens so rarely in Vegas that we still don't know. But in Vegas, the times that he did get up into the top 6, he was reasonably productive. And he went on some really nice runs at 5-on-5 from the third line too at times. It didn't all add up to great production. You look at his numbers and you might wonder what's so special about this guy. But what's special about this guy is that he's come into the NHL with upside. He hasn't had a chance to show it yet. He's on a team that really wants him to come through. 1, because they have no other players, and 2, because they just traded their franchise, the guy who was supposed to be their franchise cornerstone, for Alex Tuch. So I think that's, maybe that's a little bit of pressure on Alex Tuch's shoulders, and sometimes that works out and sometimes it doesn't. But I'm definitely curious to see what Tuch can do once he's unleashed in a top 6, which is still debatable if that's actually what's going to happen in Buffalo, given the line mates you mentioned, Elon, and given the other options that even exist out there, which are few and far between. But I would also be very interested in Alex Tuch. We've been interested in Jeff Skinner this year, in Tage Thompson, in Rasmus Asplund. We're interested right now in Kyle Okposo. I don't see why, if all those guys could be rosterable at one point or another, that Alex Tuch wouldn't be.
Yeah, exactly. Tuck might be the best of all of these players. And by the way, just to decrease the pressure a little bit, he was traded. It wasn't a 1-for-1, right? They also got Peyton Krebs and a couple picks. So no pressure, Alex Tuck. Do your thing. And we're wishing you well. Hopefully he'll be fully healthy and able to make a meaningful contribution there. Okay, one last injury I'll mention is Jared Spurgeon re-aggravated his lower body injury. And Coach Eveson said, it's not good. That was the quote in the tweet. I know, Brian, you retweeted another tweet that said, it's not a short-term injury. So yeah, it's clearly going to be a little while. And while Spurgeon was out before, it was Jonas Brodin who took over his role on the top power play, and he did really well, right? He had 7 points in 7 games while Spurgeon was out. So then I'm sure a lot of people, when Spurgeon came back, I think we even said on the show, yeah, probably time to drop Jonas Brodin. So Brian, now is it time for people to jump back on him, on Brodin that is, because if Spurgeon is out long term, I'd imagine Brodin goes back on his spot on the top power play, and that's a pretty sweet spot to be over in Minnesota.
I retweeted snarkily a very frustrating tweet today. It was from NBC Fantasy Edge, and the tweet was, Jared Spurgeon doesn't have a short-term injury. And like with a link to go further. It's like, that's the headline. Like, tell me what he does have. Like, I don't care what he doesn't have. Either that could mean he's perfectly healthy, or that means he has a long-term injury.
It's the second one.
Yeah, it is the second one. So now that that's clarified and we're better at communicating than NBC Fantasy Edge is, I'm interested in Brodin while he's on the top unit. I remember back when you asked me this in the short term, I was like, yeah, you could, because he's a power play quarterback, but he's never really shown a whole lot in that power play quarterback role. However, Jonas Brodin put up 2 power play points in the 6 games or so that he spent on like seeing the majority of power play one time while Spurgeon was just out too. So that's enough for me to be like, okay, maybe this guy is rosterable. I mean, D, especially at this point of the season, are so super scarce in a lot of leagues. So Brodin is like a hard option to pass up in leagues where, you know, you might have had guys running for Cale Clegg or Sean Dursey or, you know, anybody who comes up and looks like they could be somebody. Jonas Brodin is someone who's going to definitely stay in the league and eat big minutes, and now has this power play one quarterback opportunity, which is worth looking at.
Yeah, definitely consider Brodin in your deeper leagues because he was good. At one point, he was a guy that we thought might be, a high upside prospect. It hasn't really worked out that way, but now he's getting an opportunity he generally didn't have. All right, so Brian, we've got the whole Schmore goalies board ready to go. So how about before we get into that, let's do our ad break here, and then we'll be able to do ad-free the rest of the way. So we want to take this moment to thank our sponsor for this week's episode, and those are our friends over at TickPick. We've been talking about them, and Ben and Lewis have been talking about them on short shifts for a little while. You may be thinking, now's kind of a weird time to be buying tickets for events with COVID kind of getting around. But you know what? COVID's not going to be around forever. And maybe now's a good time to get ticket prices a little bit cheaper, especially if you buy something far in the future. So take a look at TickPick because that's your place to go when you're searching for tickets on the internet, right? That's TickPick. It's the original no-fee ticket site and the only one you'll ever need as your go-to for all tickets for NHL hockey and concerts, NFL, NBA, all that stuff. Okay, unlike some other sites, they've gotten rid of like fees, and you know how frustrating it is, right? When you go to buy a ticket and you think it's going to be one price, then it's like, oh, by the way, it's an extra $50 for servicing fee, which is like, what's servicing fee? It's an internet site, right? You're just transferring, it's data. Anyway, TickPick doesn't have that. That's great. They even have a guaranteed best price. So if you find a better price somewhere else, they're going to not only match it, but give you 110% of the difference in the purchase price. So if you have some tickets you're looking to buy, it's also the holidays, right? You can buy someone a present for a ticket to something a little bit down the road. Go to tickpick.com/Karlsson. And there you go. You'll get your tickets over at TickPick. All right, so we're going to cut to one other ad, and then we're going to be back at you for our Schmore Goaliesborg mid-season extravaganza. You're listening to Keeping Karlsson. Okay, we are back. Brian, let's get into it. So Schmore Goaliesborg, quick overview for people who have never listened to one of our goalie tiering episodes such as these. We're not going to give you a ranking of every goalie from 1 to 30 or whatever. The whole idea of coming up with tiers is that we're saying that the goalies in the same tier are pretty interchangeable because let's be real, goalies are even hard to predict even from different tiers. Even this is a hard exercise to do, but goalies, you have no idea if they're going to do well or not, and the past doesn't predict the future maybe as well as skaters. So to do apples and oranges or compare two goalies is tough, but at least we can break them into these tiers to help us make, big decisions. Like, should I trade this guy for this guy? If it's two goalies in the same tier, maybe you'll be like, give me a little sweetener to make it worth it because I don't know one way or the other. But if it's a goalie in two separate tiers, we're going to talk about why we think one goalie is like a level, order of magnitude maybe above another goalie. The factors we're going to be looking at here are going to be like basically team quality, which, kind of translates to wins, goalie quality, which, basically translates to save percentage, and then like expected volume, which you could think of as like saves, right? And so those are the three things we care about. And so we're going to be looking at it with like cupful scoring in mind, which we have like, 2 points for a win, 2 points for a shutout, 0.35 for a save, and negative 1.5 for a goals against. Obviously, you could think about your league as we go through this, and maybe you're going to have to tinker our goalie tiers. Like if your league weighs wins a lot higher, then in this discussion, we'll be talking about why we have a certain goalie in a certain tier. So maybe you'll want to give the wins guys, a bit of a bump, and save percentage guys a little bit of a decrease. So that's up to you to decide when you're listening. And yeah, we're not drafting, but if you have an ad drop that decision you want to make, or you have a trade you're considering, you'll be able to use our goalie tiers, which by the way are published at keepingkarlsson.com/goalies. And that will, hopefully help you out. And I'm really looking forward, Brian, to talking through all these goalies with you.
Me too. This is like I don't know. There's nothing more for me to say. I'm just gonna. Me too. So why don't we just get at her? Pitter patter. I said it the backwards way, but no, let me just, okay. Me too. So let's do it.
Okay. All right. So here we go. Let's start with tier 1. This guy is not currently like the number 1 ranked goalie in the league, but I think we're still going to have, as usual, one goalie in tier 1 that we see as the most reliable moving forward. By the way, these tiers are not based on what we've seen so far. Right? This is Brian and I's prediction for who's going to be the most valuable in fantasy moving forward for the rest of this season. And there's no goalie more reliable, of course, than Andrei Vasilevskiy on Tampa. 23 games so far, 16 of them have been wins. He has a .928 save percentage. It's like even better than he was last year. So yeah, there's a couple other goalies with a higher save percentage. There's a couple goalies tied with him in wins, I believe. Well, actually only one goalie that's tied with him in wins, Jacob Markstrom. But yeah, I just couldn't see a reason to put another goalie in a tier with Vasilevskiy just because he's the one I could like set my watch to. I'm not worried about.
Definitely. There's one goalie in the league who you can rely on to be the undisputed number 1 and to be on a team that is going to consistently win games and to put up a really strong save percentage. And that is Andrei Vasilevskiy. He ticks all 3 of those boxes like no other goalie in the league can. And that's why he is all alone at the top of the league. By the way, he also he's making him he looks good and he plays for Tampa, but he is one of the best performing goalies in the league once again this year in Delta Fenwick save percentage, which I'll take a moment to explain because we're going deep on goalies. You might have heard this before, but I use Evolving Hockey, evolving-hockey.com to grab a lot of my goalie data. And on Evolving Hockey, they have one calculation on there that is expected Fenwick save percentage. So that's of all unblocked shots that get to the net or that go towards the net. So it counts unblocked shots that miss the net because it gives credit for what a goalie might, have angled off, taken a space away from a shooter that forces the shooter to miss wide. So of all unblocked shot attempts towards the net, Evolving Hockey has an expected save percentage on those shots for a goalie. And that's called the expected Fenwick save percentage. A Fenwick is an unblocked shot attempt. And beyond that, Evolving Hockey has a category called Delta Fenwick save percentage, which basically describes the difference between a goalie's expected Fenwick save percentage and their actual Fenwick save percentage. And so a high Delta Fenwick save percentage in the positives means that a goalie is outplaying their expected numbers based on the difficulty of the shots they're facing. So these expected numbers are calculated using expected goals models based on where the shot is coming from for the most part on the ice. It's one of the biggest determinants here. So Andrei Vasilevskiy, for example, is 3rd in the NHL this season in Delta Fenwick save percentage amongst guys who have played a significant number of games. You might say he's 4th if you're going to lower the bar just a little bit, but either way, he's ahead of the pack. Oh, actually, sorry. Andrei Vasilevskiy is a top 5 goalie in Delta Fenwick save percentage this season, which means he is right at the front of the pack of all goalies in the NHL who are outperforming what would be expected of an average goalie in their position. And this is like the number one way that we try and figure out, like we try and control for everything. It's like, okay, this goalie plays for this team. These are the quality of shots he faces. How good is he really? Could another goalie step in and do the same thing? Or is he really doing way better than another goalie would? The example that we often like to use is Minnesota from past years, where they have done such a great job protecting their goalie for like a decade now. And so a good save percentage in Minnesota, a good raw save percentage, like the ones that you track in your fantasy leagues, doesn't necessarily mean you've got a good goalie. It just means that a goalie might be succeeding because their workload is easy. And of course, Devan Dubnyk was both someone who benefited from that and then couldn't even keep up with that easy workload in Minnesota. All of this to say, Andrei Vasilevskiy has one of the top Delta Fenwick save percentages in the league this season. He is not coasting to this 928 save percentage, 16 win season he has. Tampa's making him work hard, and he is up to the task as he's shown for the last few years. So way to go, Andrei Vasilevskiy. You stand alone above all other goalies in Schmorgoldi's board.
Right. Okay. So that's tier 1. No difference from our start of the year. So far we got it right, basically. But now we're going to get to tier 2, and we're going to have some goalies in here that have changed a lot. Some of them have really jumped high since we've moved them over to tier 2 here. So we have a pretty big tier because there's a lot of goalies that we decided to come up with here that it's really hard to tell who's going to be better. Like, I'll give you the first couple: Jack Campbell and Jacob Markstrom. Like Campbell's been amazing this year, right? He has a 937 save percentage, 15 wins in 23 games. Markstrom has a 933 save percentage in 21 games, 10 wins. Like, they've both been good. If you were to tweet at us and be like, should I trade Jack Campbell for Jacob Markstrom? I'd be like, I don't know. Maybe, I guess maybe Brian will say that Petr Mrazek is more of a challenger to Jack Campbell for games, but then maybe you also would say that Toronto's a bit of a better team. So, you kind of have to think about what you want. But, we have those two in the same tier, and we've got a bunch of other goalies. Maybe I'll name another 3 and we could go through those, because we actually have, how many is it? 8 goalies in this tier. And then we'll try to explain why we are having trouble differentiating them. So Campbell, Markstrom, throw in UC Saros, who has a 924 save percentage in 24 games. These are goalies who are their team's for sure number 1, doing amazing, right? So Campbell, Markstrom, Saros, Tristan Jari. How can we not have him here? 933 save percentage now. And I'll throw in one more name here for this first group to discuss, and that's Thatcher Demko, who probably has the lowest save percentage overall on the season in this tier. Oh no, actually Halabuck does, who we'll get to later. But Demko has a 919. So if you just look at that, you're like, maybe he doesn't belong here. Maybe he should be in the tier below. But Demko has a whole other story if you just look recently, especially if you just look since Bruce Boudreau took over as coach. Demko's been a whole other goalie. He's got over a 940 save percentage in this run. Vancouver hasn't lost a game since Boudreau took over as coach. So I'm not completely, but pretty much willing to throw out a lot of the numbers from before Boudreau took over. Not to say that Demko's going to keep up this hot streak, but definitely at this point, I see him, in the same tier as Campbell, Jari, Saros, Markstrom. I'll just say the other 3 since, I don't know. And then Brian, I guess you'll just talk for a million years. We also have Frederick Anderson in this tier, 930 save percentage, 16 wins in 21 games. He's been amazing. Shesterkin, he's injured right now. I think he's just came off of IR. So he's having this phenomenal year that Rangers fans were so excited to get. Finally, the new King Henrik is now King Igor, a 937 save percentage, 13 wins in 18 games. That might be the best win percentage of all these guys. And then Conor Halabuck, who he was the tough one. So maybe we'll save him at the end. But Brian, so Campbell, Demko, Jari, Saros, Markstrom, Anderson, Shesterkin. Any thoughts on any of these guys, and how surprised you are maybe that they have jumped now into this tier?
Yeah, I'll try, and I think the best way to do this might just be to give a quick thought on each of them. And I'll go in the order you mentioned them, starting with Jack Campbell, who, yes, is a tier 2 goalie. And we didn't know, we thought maybe there was tier 2 upside for Jack Campbell this season, but going into it, in a timeshare with Petr Mrazek, who Toronto had just signed to a 3-year deal that wasn't particularly cheap, you would think that maybe there was going to be more of a timeshare. And Elon, I know your faith in Petr Mrazek is shaken, and I can't blame you. He's been super inconsistent over the course of his career when healthy, and a lot of times he hasn't been healthy. But if you look at his numbers over the years, you get up, you get down, you get up, you get down. There's been more up than down for Petr Mrazek, but there's no real confidence left over from all those downs that he's had. I'm confident that Mrazek is at least an average NHL goalie But if you're not going to do it on a nightly basis in Toronto, then maybe you don't get as many opportunities as you should. So Jack Campbell has really, when Petr Mrazek was out, taken the job and run with it. My concern is still that maybe Toronto, it depends on how they want to load manage their goalies, because they still have Mrazek. He's still there. So it's possible that Campbell, instead of, starting every 5 of 6, which is what he was doing when Mrazek was out, the Leafs are like, okay, Jack, you start 2 of 3 or maybe even 3 of 4. Of course, this depends on Mrazek's play. I just don't think, like you mentioned, all these other guys, Demko, Jari, Saros, Markstrom, Anderson, Shesterkin, and Halabuck, neither of these guys is in any kind of timeshare. Like, their teams don't want them to share the crease. The goalies don't want to share the crease either, and they're all earning their keep. But Jack Campbell kind of stands out to me in this group as the exception, but we have to give him tons of credit for the work he's doing this year. He is the reason why Toronto has won certain nights. So, and they've needed this from a goalie for the last couple of years. They had a couple really good years of Freddie Anderson too, and it's nice that Jack Campbell finally is living up to his potential and maybe getting more like beyond just the 1A role that we were hoping he'd have this year.
Yeah, Kyle here in the chat is saying, is Petter's last name Glass because the guy can't stay healthy? So yeah, Brian, you might say, Toronto might want to play Campbell and Mrazek maybe more evenly than some of these other teams, but that's also depends on Mrazek staying healthy, which again, I don't have faith. Anyways, whatever. I honestly don't see much of a difference at this point between Campbell and Mrazek versus Markstrom and Vladar. I know you do, so we'll see. I could be totally wrong here, but I don't know. My gut says that Campbell's going to be a volume guy, but there's no way to know, of course.
Yeah, there's no way to know. And if you were asking me to bet, I might go the same. And I did mention, just so you know, I'm not sure if you, I did mention Mrazek's health already being a concern. And I think, what was I going to say? I think along the same lines as you, Elon, that Jack Campbell has played well, really well. Petr Mrazek hasn't. We also did have Jack Campbell health concerns going into the season. So far, thankfully, those haven't come to fruition. So that's my one comment, Elon, if I'm allowed it, on Jack Campbell being in tier 2. Thatcher Demko, I mean, look, his numbers didn't look good. Thatcher Demko, his numbers didn't look good before Bruce Boudreau came around. He had like a 908 save percentage, but all season long, he's been outplaying his expected Fenwick save percentage by a long bit. By the way, Vasilevskiy, Campbell, and Demko are all top 3 in the league, top 5 in the NHL in Delta Fenwick save percentage. So all these guys are outplaying their expected numbers by about the same amount right now. And Demko, for doing that, ends up with the lowest save percentage. Like, Campbell has 937, Vasilevskiy 928. Demko has this 919 save percentage, even though he has performed as well above expected as Campbell and Vasilevskiy. And that just shows you what the challenge is of playing in net for the Vancouver Canucks so far this season. It's really nice that Boudreau has come in, helped Vancouver feel some new life, get on a roll. That's great. Like you said, Elon, the wins aren't going to keep coming this way, but Demko's value definitely is higher now than it was before, because I think it's less likely Vancouver is going to be the total disaster they were to start the season. One thing to keep in mind is that if Boudreau, I honestly don't know if he has the personnel to do this, but if Vancouver is able to play a better defensive game, that might take some shot volume away from Demko, but maybe he still picks up like an extra win or 3 or 4 through the rest of the season because of Boudreau, and that helps even out any hit you take there. The rest of this group, we've got Tristan Jari, who we mentioned preseason is somebody who is going to be disproportionately judged based on his playoff background, and that who we said coming into the season was going to be disproportionately judged based on his playoff meltdown last season. That was a fresh image in everyone's minds still as everybody drafted their fantasy teams, and we said there might be some value here. Sure enough, there has been. So way to go, Tristan Jari, and anyone who took a chance on him. UC Saros, no surprise having him here. Jacob Markstrom doing amazing. Let's just shout out all of Calgary for a moment and the incredible work that they're doing as a team. They look really good in a lot of different ways. But one misconception is that this Calgary team is playing really high-end defensive hockey, the same way that Daryl Sutter's LA Kings teams performed by just shutting down the entire game and then, squeaking out a 2-1 win every night. That's not what Calgary's doing. And Jacob Markstrom is working his tail off. So I just want to give him credit. He is actually top 3 in the NHL in Delta Fenwick save percentage. He is behind only 2 players, one Jonathan Quick, and the other is Freddie Anderson. This is the only 2 guys who are outplaying their expected save percentage numbers more than Jacob Markstrom is. So he deserves a lot of credit for the work he's done in Calgary. I think it's a really great match of goalie and system. The whole team is firing on all cylinders. And so I'd like Jacob Markstrom to be able to continue like a tier 2 goalie the rest of the season. Freddie Anderson in Carolina, Igor Shesterkin in New York. Elon, how many years do you think it is before Igor Shesterkin is a tier 1 goalie? I'm almost tempted to put him there already. He seems so dependable already. He's way outplaying his Delta Fenwick save percentage, 937 save percentage, undisputed starter, 13 wins in 18 games. Like, I could make an argument that Shesterkin belongs in the top tier now because of how dependable he is and he's on a good team. Is it a sure thing that Shesterkin is a tier 1 goalie at the start of next season?
I mean, if it was a sure thing, then I would put him at the top tier right now for the midseason. I think, assuming he continues what he's been doing for the rest of this season, I think that would be enough to convince me to put him in tier 1 next season. But, it's not such a huge track record that I'm ready to put him up with Vasilevskiy just yet. Like, if I had Shesterkin and I thought I could get Vasilevskiy for him, I'd probably just take that deal and get the, to me, still safer bet. But you're right, Brian, that it's getting closer and closer with every game that Shesterkin plays and dominates.
Yeah, and of all these guys in tier 2, he and Markstrom. The idea is that they're all equal because we'd all have them similar trade value, but I think those 2 are the ones that stand out amongst the others as someone I feel like I can depend on and is on a team that is stable and in quality. And then, of course, we have Conor Halabuck rounding out the tier, who is actually doing really well. He's doing such hard work in Winnipeg. We talked about Demko and the hard work he's been doing in Vancouver. Halabuck's workload has been similarly challenging as a Jet. And we talked about this going into the season, but these are the situations in which Halabuck seems to thrive. He's thriving a little less than usual, but again, he is one of these top goalies this season, Delta Fenwick save percentage. So don't let this 915 save percentage really distract you from Conor Halabuck still being a really good goalie and one of the best of the last several years. And Elon, I don't think I mentioned this off the top, but I should just clarify. All my save percentage numbers that I'm using when I'm talking Delta Fenwick save percentage and expected save percentage, those are all 5-on-5 only to isolate the most common game state that goalies are playing in.
Okay, yeah, that's good to know. I know that you always like to say that we shouldn't be giving too much weight to the shorthanded save percentage because sometimes teams just take more penalties than others. And it's a low repeatable, not low repeatable. Sorry, it's a low sample size part of the game, and sometimes a goalie could just get unlucky with a couple shorthanded goals against, and that could affect their overall numbers. So it's easier just to isolate the even strength to try to tell if they're good or not. But obviously, if a goalie is doing really well shorthanded for a long time, great. But yeah, I definitely agree that makes sense to use even strength for these numbers, just comparing how players are doing under the hood. Okay, so that's our tier 2. So now as we go down to tiers 3 and 4, we not only have to justify why we think these goalies belong in the tier they're in, but also why did we not have them in tier 2? So tier 3, we've got 3 more good goalies here that I'm sure people will tell us there's an argument to be made that they should be in tier 2 because these are again 3 goalies that I've come to find as pretty dependable, but for some reason I just have them a little bit lower than that group we just said. And K100 in the chat here, sorry, not Sarokin. Maybe we'll take some heat for this. Sorokin's going to be down in tier 4, so we'll get to him soon. But in tier 3, we've got 3 guys. So Cam Talbot, who, Brian, you've talked about, plays in this system in Minnesota, and he's doing well. He's a 919 save percentage, so he's not as high as a lot of these goalies in tier 2. The only goalie in tier 2 with a lower save percentage than Talbot is Halabuck, and we just had to put Halabuck there because of the history he's given us of just being so reliable, right? So Halabuck. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Brian. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, you were also saying when we were working at our tiers before we came on is that you have a little bit of worry about whether Cam Talbot can keep seeing a number 1 share of the starts, where that's not a doubt at all for Halabuck.
Yeah, that's true. And like again, it's not that I don't think Talbot's gonna like get a starter's share, but I think like the same as your fear for Jack Campbell with Mrazek, right? Like maybe Talbot won't get as many starts as he has been getting. Like Kokkinen's come in and done well for some games, and he is the future. So yeah, there is something in the back of my mind. It's like obviously shrinking as Talbot keeps playing and keeps playing well, and Minnesota's winning. I don't know why they'd mess with something, but yeah, that's like So there's a little bit of that, a little bit of the fact that his numbers are a little bit lower, a little bit of the fact that he's like Cam Talbot is 34. I don't know. Like I like him a lot. I'm putting him in tier 3. I'd rather have those other goalies that we talked about ahead of him. But, no shade on Cam Talbot.
Yeah, for sure. Cam Talbot is someone you can rely on. I'm less worried than you are about Kaapo Kähkönen taking starts, and he's in Minnesota, who protect their goalies really well still. Even like they're on their third or fourth coach who's just been like, okay, we have a system. We're just going to tweak it after the coach inevitably gets fired. But Cam Talbot, I can differentiate him from all the tier 1 and 2 goalies so far by saying this, and that's that Cam Talbot is the only goalie of the ones we've mentioned so far who is underplaying his expected Fenwick save percentage at 5-on-5. So Cam Talbot, not as good an actual goalie as these other guys. And you mentioned Elon, like his save percentage shows it compared to the rest of this crew too. So that's why he's in tier 3. But honestly, I think he could be a tier 2 goalie.
Yeah, like I wouldn't be like upset at anyone who trades like Talbot for Tristan Jari or whatever takes the Talbot side. It's just like I'm gonna have a little bit more faith in Jari, Saros, whoever. But yeah, so tier 3 starts with Cam Talbot. Then the other two are Sergei Bobrovsky and Marc-Andre Fleury, two goalies who in the past have been super high up on these lists. And then going into this season, they fell, right? We had Bobrovsky in tier 7, believe it or not, because we thought that Spencer Knight was going to be a goalie that was going to challenge to maybe be the starter. Not only has Spencer Knight not been the starter, hasn't even been like a high volume backup. He's like Spencer Knight's become basically a non-factor, and Bobrovsky basically plays all the time. And he's been solid, right? 917 save percentage, 12 wins. If Florida ever gets fully healthy again, I think this is like a cup contender team here in terms of the talent, and Bobrovsky is their volume starter. So I really like him. And then Marc-Andre Fleury, like we had him in tier 4. Then at first it felt like we like had him way too high because he started the year badly. But then, after shaking off some rust, Fleury has really settled in to be a solid goalie. Like, yeah, you're not going to get a lot of wins on Chicago, but like all the more impressive that he's able to put up these numbers. Like if you look at overall, he's got 913 save percentage. But again, that was from some brutal starts early on. He let in 4, 4, 4, and 6 goals in his first 4 games. And since then, he's only had like 3 games I'm seeing with 4 or more goals against. And then just a lot of 3, 0, 2, 1. And yeah, it all rounds out to a 913 save percentage overall. But yeah, Lankinen also has been a lot more disappointing than I thought he would be. I was expecting that Lankinen might be, almost as good as Fleury and like challenged to be the starter. But no, it just seems like Fleury's getting all the games, and so yeah, he's not such a great play for wins, but seems like he's really going to be good for saves and solid enough for save percentage. So yeah, that's our tier 3: Talbot, Bobrovsky, and Fleury.
The worst advice we've given all season, Elon, is back, I don't know, it must have been a couple weeks in. I hope it was only a couple weeks in, but after a month or 8 games worth of play for Marc-Andre Fleury, he was 1-7-0 with an 881 save percentage. And we said, drop him. Like, we were like, he's done. Lankinen is a capable challenger, and Chicago looks awful. And they did. And a few things have happened since then. Chicago changed coaches and seems to have found their feet a little bit. And Marc-Andre Fleury specifically has now gone 8-3-1 in his last 12 with a 933 save percentage. So even if you're looking at Fleury's full season 913 save percentage, like that's still not terrible, especially for a tier like someone could get into tier 3 of our goalie tiers with it. But considering he has a 933 save percentage in his last 12 games have spanned about 5-6 weeks. Yeah, Marc-Andre Fleury, still a pretty good goalie. He actually, believe it or not, hasn't quite washed out all of the awfulness that he started the season with. Like if you look at his Delta Fenwick save percentage, he's still playing a little below his expected number based on the workload he faces. But that really is just residual from all the trouble and challenge that he had adjusting to Chicago, I guess, and that Chicago had adjusting to him. So Marc-Andre Fleury, way to find your feet when we'd all given up on you. And we're sorry to anybody who did go ahead and drop the then 36-year-old, now 37-year-old, because you thought he was totally washed. We sincerely apologize and own that. And we'll try and learn some kind of lesson from it, which isn't so far with Sergei Bobrovsky over in tier 3 with Marc-Andre Fleury, who himself is having a pretty good season. I mean, this was one of the hottest debates coming into the season. And at one point, like I feel like I remember, Elon, correct me if I'm wrong, but the night before the season started, or 2 nights, then coach of the Florida Panthers, Joel Quenneville, said that Spencer Knight was making a push to be the opening night starter. And everyone was like losing it.
Because I remember the opposite. I remember we got news from Quenneville saying Bobrovsky's going to get the majority of the starts and Spencer Knight is going to be the backup. I thought that was like the big news that I think came out after our Schmore Goalies Board episode.
Yeah, so maybe it was a week before that, and it was like it's an open competition and Knight can win. And like there was a moment where something was said and everyone was like, oh, if I'm reading the tea leaves, Spencer Knight, he's going to be the number 1 goalie in Florida. I don't even have to think about a timeshare, or the chances of him being the number 1 goalie are good enough that I'm going to go take a flyer. And yeah, clearly that's not what's happened. And part of that is because of the sterling play of Sergei Bobrovsky so far this season. 12 wins in 19 games, a decent save percentage at 5-on-5, but he is the only of these tier 3 goalies between Talbot and Fleury. He's the only one that is outplaying his expected numbers. And this comes after a pretty lousy couple years where he was underplaying his expected numbers. But Bobrovsky's had a huge bounce back this season that, again, we didn't really see coming. Like, it's like, okay, how long were we ready to watch Bobrovsky be bad, like legitimately bad, and then say, well, he's still got a chance, even with this big contract also on his shoulders and a new challenger coming up. And at 33 years old, going into the season, we're like, yeah, maybe this is about it. But he has really flipped the script on us. And now Sergei Bobrovsky is the far and away number 1. And part of that, again, is because of his own play. And part of that is because Spencer Knight just has not looked NHL ready. I mean, we'll touch on him a little bit more when we share what tier he's in. But I'll tell you right now, he's actually one of the worst performing goalies, according to his expected save numbers. Spencer Knight is having a really hard time keeping up with his workload this season. And that's one of the reasons that I don't expect him to take the number 1 job this year. Or, hey, there's still 7 more years after this one on Bobrovsky's contract. So I'm not sure anybody who is rostering Knight in a long-term dynasty setting, you got to be sweating at least a little bit. You know that changeover is coming eventually, but a subpar year from him and an incredible year from Bobrovsky does not spell great things for you in the near or perhaps even medium future.
Yeah, I mean, you could look at it that way, or as Shane is saying here in the chat, now is your chance to sell high on Bobrovsky, buy low on Spencer Knight. Like, Spencer Knight has a huge pedigree. We're talking about a really small sample size of games. So I think if I was in a league with you, Brian, I'd be sending you offers for Spencer Knight right now based on what you're saying. Yeah,
so that actually might be the takeaway here, because we are talking about 20 games of Sergei Bobrovsky, right? And that's compared to, let me just look, the past couple of years, he's played over 80 games where he's just looked flat out bad. And a lot of them came in Florida. So but it's so tricky with him because before that he was elite. So it was really uncharacteristic of Bobrovsky to take that nosedive. And just when we were adjusting to that new reality, he's done the opposite of a nosedive, the nose climb.
Yeah. And, if anything, I was thinking like it was more like the Spencer Knight stuff you were saying.
Okay. Yeah. So now would be a great time to buy low on Spencer Knight. But of course, Bobrovsky, we don't know. Like, it's so strange. We felt like we've known who this guy was for the better part of the last 7 or 8 years. And now it's all thrown into question. So great play by Sergei Bobrovsky, still a small sample size, still could collapse. And there still could be an opening at some point in the near and medium future for Spencer Knight.
Yeah, I mean, the thing with Bobrovsky is going into this season, if you had him in a dynasty cap league, you couldn't have traded him, right? You would have had to give up picks or retain salary just to get him off your team. And now is action opportunity where you might be able to trade him and actually get a return. So it might be like if you have, and again, this is for a specific type of league, right? Where like the salary cap is really coming against you. He's getting paid $10 million a year, which really hurts. So I think if you can like now, like Shane is basically saying like now might be your opportunity to move him before he becomes again once again impossible to move. So something to consider. You could always tweet at us, and probably you'd want to tweet at like Victor Nuno and Jesse from Fantasy Hockey Life who know more about prospects. I'd imagine if you'd be moving Bobrovsky, it would be more for like a prospect. But anyway, okay, that's tier 3. So now tier 4 becomes interesting, right? We've got goalies here from kind of all walks of life. We've got some goalies who really disappointed us, and we expected to be in like tiers 2 and 3, and they've fallen. And those are Robin Lehner and Darcy Kemper. And then we've also got some goalies who've really impressed us and have jumped up a lot higher than we expected them to be, like, say, an Alex Nigelkovich or Ilia Sarokin. And so tier 4 is just made up of all these guys that in the end, though, I still don't find it very easy to compare like a Leonard to a Sarokin, so that's why we're putting them together. So we'll talk through these guys one at a time. So here's tier 4, okay? First of all, Jordan Binnington, who for real, like I could see a reason to put him in tier 5 at this point. Like he hasn't been great. I think he played again today and lost again. Yeah, so he just came back from, I think he was on the COVID protocol, and today he played against Winnipeg, led in 4 goals on 34 shots. That's an .882 save percentage. And yeah, that brings his numbers down to, he was at a .912 going into today, so that probably brings him down to like a .910. So it hasn't been great for Jordan Binnington. Plus, you know, this guy, Charlie Lindgren, has been so amazing in Binnington's absence. Remember one time St. Louis had another goalie? Was it Carter Hutton? Or I don't remember exactly who it was, but they had another goalie that was supposed to be the starter. And then some guy named Jordan Binnington came in and then stole his job and ended up taking the Blues to the Cup finals and winning the Cup. So I wonder if Binnington could potentially get Binnington by Charlie Lindgren. Of course, that's like the biggest fear as a Binnington manager. At the same time, it could just be that, you know, Charlie Lindgren gets sent back down to the minors and Husso becomes the backup in Binnington. So he's like a tough one, Brian. Maybe we could discuss if you are also afraid of him. I think he's the goalie I like least in this tier 4, but we have him there. Then we have Robin Lehner, who has been pretty bad this year, but he's still, you know, the starter on a good team. He got the win today. 4-3 overtime win for Vegas over the Islanders. Leonard stopped 29 of 32. So not amazing, but still, you know, especially for league counts wins, Vegas is a really good team. Then we've got Darcy Kemper here, another one of these disappointments, 907 overall, though Kemper has actually been pretty good lately. So on one hand, you could think, okay, maybe now's a good time to buy in on Kemper, though he's currently in the COVID protocol, of course, but once he's out of it, like his last 3 games have all been gems. But of course, on the other side, Pavel Francouz is out of the IR, and so maybe he'll challenge for starts. So I think that all washes out to Darcy Kemper being here in tier 4. We've got Carter Hart, who has been better than he was last year, that's for sure. Maybe not as amazing as maybe I would have hoped that he'd be. Like Philly overall hasn't been that great, though actually lately Philly has been better since the coaching change. And overall, Carter Hart has a .918 save percentage, which is nothing to sneeze at. And he's again the volume guy there. Martin Jones isn't going to be stealing his job. Still some more names here. We've got Ilya Sorokin, who is a very interesting guy, right? Because if he was the for sure starter, then we'd maybe even have him higher because he's having a great season, .926 save percentage. But the reason why we have him here in tier 4 is, I guess, two-pronged. First of all, Varlimov, who hasn't been great, there's always the chance that Varlimov gets his game back over the Christmas break and they go back to 50-50 like the plan was. Also, the Islanders aren't as good as we hoped they'd be. They only have 7 wins. Like, Sorokin only has 7 wins in his 18 games. So all of that keeps him in tier 4 for now, though he's, I think, the highest upside goalie in this tier if he ends up playing as many games over Varlamov as he has so far. Then still 3 more here. Elvis Merslickens. He has been not so great, but he is a starting goalie, and I know that we were really high on him going into the year. So he lands here. Here's a surprise goalie, Alex Nigelkovich, who we had way down in tier 8 at the start. We thought he'd be in a timeshare with Thomas Greiss, but no. Nigelkovich was getting all the games before he finally went into the COVID protocol. So the Red Wings played Greiss yesterday, and actually Greiss got the win, so good for him. But yeah, Nigelkovich has been great. He has a .916 save percentage, which for the Red Wings is good. And also the Red Wings are a little bit better than we expected with like Lucas Raymond doing so well. And of course, my favorite defenseman. Oh no, I'm blanking on his name. And he's like, Moritz Seider. Yeah, favorite defenseman, Moritz Seider, who I bet on to win the Calder, and I'm still hoping they'll be able to pull that out. And then finally, ending this tier, we've got John Gibson, who I guess, kind of afraid of, just like Binnington, just because the backup Stolars has been doing really well lately, and now Gibson came back and had a bit of a clunker of a game, but still, Anaheim's been better than expected overall, and Gibson has been, I don't know. I'll be curious to get your thoughts on him too. So I guess this is the episode where I talk for 5 minutes, then Brian talks for 10 minutes. But here we go. To recap, tier 4, Binnington, Leonard, Kemper, Sarokin, Hart, Merslickens, Nigelkovich, and Gibson. That was a big tier.
All right. And I'm going to take it from the top of goalies ranked by their Delta Fenwick save percentage. So which goalies seem to be actually outperforming or performing the best, like playing the best at their position. And I'll start with Ilya Sorokin, that way, who is just playing for a team, the New York Islanders, that have not found their way. They've had such a rocky, weird schedule. We've talked about this on the show before, and then, had a series of postponements just when things were supposed to start evening out, and now the whole league is seeing postponements. So I'm not sure exactly what is going to become of this New York Islanders team that just needed, I don't know, some stability, like something to go their way for the start of the season. But right now, the Isles sit at the bottom of the Metropolitan Division with 22 points in 26 games. They have a few games in hand on New Jersey and Philly, who are ahead of them and could catch at least New Jersey if they won them out. But this is not what we expected to be saying about the Isles, with a minus 20 goal differential too, which is better than only New Jersey in that Metropolitan Division, is one of the worst in the entire league and Eastern Conference. So how did we get here with the Islanders? Still don't know. That's the big question, right? The question is, how are we going to get out of it? And it's been a really frustrating time, because if you have Sorokin on your roster, he's only playing half the games, right? So what are you going to do about it? There's not a whole lot you can do while you wait. And usually if he got in for his start last season, it was like, okay, this is great. I'm going to have a good night and I'll settle while he's on the bench the next time. But that just hasn't happened, which has made rostering Sorokin that much harder this season. That said, he's playing really well and he is making a case, and Varlimov is making the same case on the other side, that maybe it's time for the Isles to ditch this 50-50 thing. And if you have Ilya Sorokin on your roster, that's really what you're hoping for, is you're hoping for the Isles somehow at the quarter mark of the season to become a completely different team than they've been for the first quarter of the season, which I think is possible, because dang, they're still a pretty good team. And then you also would be hoping for Varlamov to continue being bad and Sorokin to continue being good. So way to go, Ilya Sorokin. For at least holding up your end of the bargain. And right behind Ilya Sorokin in Delta Fenwick save percentage is Carter Hart. Yeah, Carter Hart, playing in Philadelphia with a new look defense, sort of, right? Because Ristolainen's there, Yandel's there, but one really important piece isn't, and Ryan Ellis. And way to go, Carter Hart, for holding Philadelphia in some games and really performing well despite some really difficult circumstances, as Philly has looked lost this year. The same way, like, even when their defense has been okay and Carter Hart or even Martin Jones are holding up their end of the deal, the offense has gone completely missing. So Carter Hart actually looks to me, of this group, like a decent buy low candidate, because he's playing really well, but he's on a team that's seen a lot of bad luck, both in injuries and in their offensive fortunes. So Carter Hart is better than he's looked this year, and I think that's really exciting for anybody who has him in a dynasty format, especially. And then next on the list is Alex Nadalkovic, who, like you said, Elon, has taken the mantle unexpectedly and unquestionably from Tomas Greiss, who has done his own part to play himself out of a timeshare role. But Nadalkovic showing that last year's Calder run was no flash in the pan. He's been good in the time he's played, and I think he's one of the reasons that Detroit has been as competitive as they have been. Detroit as a team has been better, and that's helped Nadalkovic too. So it's been a good match so far for Nadalkovic in Detroit. It's amazing that nobody pushed harder to bring him onto their roster than Yzerman had to pay for Alex Nadalkovic. Next on the list is Jordan Binnington, who, Elon, you mentioned, like, he came out of nowhere back in, 2018-19?
Yeah, and actually I could correct myself. It was Jake Allen who was the other goalie. Yeah. And there was Chad Johnson who was supposed to be the backup, but then it was, Binnington who took over.
Right. It was Jake Allen and Chad Johnson. And Ville Husso was supposed to be the third stringer, who just got totally leapfrogged by Jordan Binnington. And now, of course, we're seeing Husso try and claw back some of what he lost to Jordan Binnington. Jordan Binnington I had in a similar category as Tristan Jari coming into the season, which is that I think he's better than he gets credit for. He's like, he likes to get into fights on the ice and has a bit of a reputation for being kind of not great at composing himself or keeping himself composed in hot situations. But for what it's worth, Jordan Binnington in the crease, despite just a .912 save percentage on the season, is doing quite well in outplaying his expected numbers. But of course, now that he hasn't been able to play lately, and Charlie Lindgren has played well, and Ville Husso has also played well, sort of, in the time that Binnington has been on the shelf, or even healthy, Husso was getting a series of starts. So I do start to question exactly how big a workload St. Louis is going to give Binnington. And I do think, like I brought up his temperament, I feel like that might play into things. Like, let's say, I don't know how it plays with the rest of the St. Louis Blues room when they see Binnington going off the way he does, and whether he's a guy that they like to play with or not. And maybe this is St. Louis having an opportunity to sort of gently check in and see, well, how are we going to do with these other goalies? So of all the goalies in this tier 4 group, Jordan Binnington is the one who I'm a little concerned with, that his workload is going to get eaten into. Of course, Darcy Kemper as well, but that's for, I don't know if it's for similar reasons or not. And I'm not sure Darcy Kemper's challenger is really up to it. But sticking to going in order of Delta Fenwick save percentage, that brings us to Robin Lehner, who we talked about a lot about on the last show. So I'm not going to go deep into it. I still think Vegas can do better for him than they have so far. And that's, I think, one of the reasons why he only has a .905 save percentage, even though Robin Lehner is outplaying his expected numbers. So hopefully Lehner and Vegas do get better the rest of the season for Robin Lehner's sake. Vegas, by the way, still leading their division with 40 points in 31 games in the Pacific, but that's tied with Anaheim, who's played one extra game, and just barely ahead of Calgary and Edmonton. So it's a pretty competitive division, and I think Vegas should probably be a little further out in front of the pack than they are. So that would help Robin Lehner if Vegas got their act together. So I think that Smore Goalies board is almost like a team's board. The pun doesn't work quite as well. Okay, and then closing out tier 4, let me mention, so we have Elvis Merslickens, who, Elon, you mentioned he's been like, now his number doesn't look good on the whole season, just a .911, and he's underplaying his expected numbers. But that's largely on the heels of the last 3 weeks, where Merslickens is just putting up an .874 save percentage with a 2-4-1 record. And boy, does that pale in comparison to how Merslickens started the season with 9 wins in 12 games and a .929 save percentage. So we've seen a tale of 2 seasons from Elvis Merslickens so far. And I'm not sure, like, I have more faith that the good Elvis Merslickens is going to win out, but I'm not 100% certain. There's not much you can do if you have him other than hold on and wait. And then we have John Gibson in Anaheim, who at a .913 is also underplaying his expected save percentage, which is kind of unfortunate because Gibson had a good start and was playing some of the best hockey we've seen him play in a few years in Anaheim, and finally has a team that can win him some games even when he's not going to be the one to win them. And now he's not doing his share of work for Anaheim. And he, like Merslickens, started strong, but in his last 8 games has just an .888 save percentage. Compare that to the start of the year where Gibson had a .925 over 15 games. So a very similar trajectory for Gibson and Merslickens, who are both net underplaying their expected numbers. And I feel like I still have faith that like Merslickens, the scales could tilt towards John Gibson, but I would be at least a little worried if I was leaning hard on Merslickens or Gibson earlier in the year. And then one guy I would be really worried about leaning on is Darcy Kemper, who has been one of the worst regular goalies in the NHL this season. I mean, Colorado made a big bet on him. They brought him in to be their number 1. He's been maybe a little dinged up along the way, but he's also just been flat out not good with that .907 save percentage. And of any goalie in the top, let me just scroll down here, aside from Philip Grubauer, of any goalie in the top 6 tiers, Darcy Kemper is the worst is putting up the worst numbers compared to his expected save percentage. And with Francouz coming in, it wasn't ideal circumstances for Francouz to play his first game in 2 years. We know that. I also don't have total faith that Francouz is an NHL starter. So Kemper's got that much going for him, but he's going to need something to break right, either in him doing well or Francouz not being up to the job to be able to hold on to this tier 4 status.
Yeah, I'll just say Kemper's had 3 good games recently. His last 3 games have been good, but now he's on COVID protocol, so who knows? Maybe he's going to lose that good vibe, that good mojo that he had started to ride over the past week. So that's too bad for him. Yeah, so a lot of up and down here on tier 4. Maybe there's going to be some arguments that the goalies here in tier 5 are equal or better than some of these guys that we just talked about. I know my good friend John Reed, who I'm a co-manager with, is definitely, if he hasn't already turned off the podcast, he's probably sending me angry tweets or messages about how we should have James Reimer higher, because he's a big Sharks fan, and Reimer has been amazing. And so we have him here in tier 5. In his 16 games, he has a .936 save percentage, so 9 wins. Sharks have been a lot better than we expected. Brian, why did we decide to have Reimer here in tier 5 and not, like, I kind of feel like Reimer, Gibson, like Binnington, Merslickens, I kind of see them the same right now. Like, Reimer was getting a whole bunch of starts in a row over Adin Hill before finally he got hurt, like everybody. I think he's in COVID protocol or something, but yeah, he was doing really well. So what's your reason why Reimer is in tier 5 and not in tier 4?
It's a great question. I think we might have just had to draw the line somewhere, because I'm looking at the rest of tier 5. Quick, Reimer, Samsonov. Sorry to spoil your game here, Elon, but Samsonov, Holtby, and Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen. This is a good group. And I think the reason that they're below the guys in tier 4 is we've just seen inconsistent play from like Jonathan Quick and James Reimer and Braden Holtby a lot for the last several years. And that's not to say we haven't seen the same of John Gibson, but we have had a little more faith more recently in John Gibson being a really good goalie than Quick, Reimer, and Holtby. But if we are just looking at this quarter of the season and we're throwing out what we thought we knew about all these guys, yeah, they're above at least a couple of those tier 4 goalies.
Right. So a lot of this has to do is we're not only just giving, again, the ranking of goalies by how well they're doing this year. It's like we have to take a little bit more under account when we're trying to project the rest of the year. We want to use like a larger sample size. So yeah, Reimer, though, to be fair, he like didn't have the opportunity to really stand out in Carolina. But at the same time, he played the way he played when he was there. And now in San Jose, he's doing really well. So yeah, he is the standout to me here in tier 5. And then you gave away some of the others, but let's mention them now in more detail. So Jonathan Quick, like Reimer, right? Just like totally surprising this year. Like everyone expected Cal Peterson to be the starting goalie in LA. We thought this was the year that the torch was going to get passed completely if it hadn't already happened. But no, Peterson has been bad. And Jonathan Quick, amazing. He's a .930 save percentage now. His last game wasn't great, unfortunately. So maybe he'll leave a bad taste in the mouth going into the holiday break. But still, you can't argue with a .930 save percentage. Only 8 wins in 18 games, but obviously you can't blame him for that. LA is playing today, and they are losing to Washington. Or no, it's 2-2 right now. And the goalie is Garrett Sparks. I didn't even know he was in the LA system. He used to be in the Toronto system. But yeah, I guess Peterson is in the COVID protocol and Quick played yesterday. So yeah, Garrett Sparks, and he's doing okay. But he's not going to be mentioned again in just 4 goalies boards. Yeah, Quick, Reimer. Yeah, Braden Holtby, actually another goalie, the exact same, right? I did not expect Braden Holtby to be the starting goalie on Dallas at this point, but he has been, and he's been really good. He's a .922 save percentage. Only 5 wins in 15 games. Is that right? Poor Holtby. He's been getting not a lot of run support for how well he's been playing. Dallas is a good team. I expect that to go up moving forward in terms of the percentage of wins compared to games played. So yeah, Holtby's been good, and I guess there's always the fear that Ettinger could come up and start stealing his job. I know, Brian, you're a huge fan of Ettinger, and so am I, but I think Rick Bowness is kind of like what Joel Quenneville was on Florida, of just saying, like, I'm just going to stick with the veteran here, and obviously Spencer Knight has not been as good as Ettinger has been, but I just get the sense that Rick Bowness just wants to play Holtby as the starter and Ettinger as the backup. Then we have Ilia Samsonov here in tier 5, which of course looked better until recently, where he hasn't been great. Like, actually, the season's been weird, right? Because Vanacek started as the starting goalie in Washington. It looked like Samsonov was just a backup, and then Samsonov took over after a while, and then he was getting all the games. But now, actually, just today, Vitek Vanacek has gotten his 2nd game in a row for the Caps for the first time in a long time, and he's, not doing that great. 15 saves and 17 shots in the 3rd versus LA. So in the end, it does seem like Samsonov Samsonov has taken over as a starter again, so we have him here in tier 5. Obviously a little bit of a shaky pick, but could be good because Washington's a good team. He's got 11 wins in the 16 games he's played. And then rounding it out, we've got a bit of a dark horse here, but I potentially want to put him higher, but who even knows if he's going to be in the NHL once everyone's healthy in Buffalo. But how can you not have Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen up here? He's only played 5 games, but he's got a .939 save percentage, 2 wins in those games. And we've talked about Alex Tuch is coming back, so who knows if that helps Buffalo get even better. So at this point, it's a bit of a swing, but if he's still in free agency, I think you've got to grab Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen, and maybe you try to trade for him if you have a goalie in the lower tier and you think that you can swing him, because there's a bit of an upside here for a fun prospect on a team that's maybe not as bad as we expected them to be.
Yeah, there definitely is. And we talked about him. Actually, we've been talking about Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen for the last few weeks, and the guys on short shifts have as well, saying how my line has been, hey, Buffalo might be a good place for a goalie to play. They are not as big a mess as you might have thought they would be. And Luukkonen coming in and outplaying his expected save percentage, not by a ton, but by a little bit, which is really promising for him. Of course, super small sample size, so we're not going to buy into anything we see whole hog. I think that's the saying. But a .939 save percentage in the time he's seen is a really great way for things to go for Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen right off the bat. And while Buffalo might have a bunch of injured or unavailable goalies, neither one necessarily has earned the number one job. So Luukkonen, if Buffalo is willing to keep giving him NHL action, could very well be the best goalie available to the Sabres for the rest of the season, which does put him in this rare position of, like, we're past the quarter mark here of the NHL season. It's pretty rare that you find a starter emerging just like that. So if goalies are valuable in your league and you haven't seen to getting Luukkonen on your roster, if he's still available, you might want to pause the pod and do that. Then I'll go over to Braden Holtby, who you're like, how is Braden Holtby only, like, how do these win numbers make sense? Only 5 wins in 15 games. And I went back to the start of the Dallas season. I don't know if you remember, Elon, but we were talking a lot about why is nobody scoring.
Oh, yeah. And that was
Dallas
before Roope Hintz came back, right? Or not even Roope Hintz. He was doing badly. It was Jason Robertson was out. Yeah, that top line has been great until now, like, Hintz is on the COVID protocol or whatever. But yeah, for that stretch where all 3 were healthy, gangbusters. Can you believe, Brian, Joe Pavelski was dropped into free agency in Tier 1 Sweden? I don't know who's kicking themselves more, myself for not having bid, like, all my fab on him as I should have, or the person who dropped him, who I won't name call. But yeah, that was a bad drop, clearly, because Pavelski was slow, but we were projecting on the show that once Robertson comes back, things could turn around, and clearly they have. But yes, you're talking about Holtby, so yeah, that explains why they haven't won those games.
Right, and that's just how dark things were looking in Dallas. I was like, oh, like, Pavelski's washed, nothing's working, no one's scoring. I don't need to carry this guy. And it shows. Like, Holtby in his first 8 starts had just 2 wins, yet hit a .918 save percentage. And Holtby, 65% of the time this season, has been putting up a quality start, which is unheard of for Braden Holtby, not just in the last few years, but basically since 16-17. Braden Holtby has not been this reliable a goalie start. So we'll see if this is something that holds up. I have my doubts, but I also think that maybe he and Dallas are a good fit for one another, and this could just work. We do have Jake Ettinger nipping at Holtby's heels. I think he's nipping a little closer to Holtby's heels than you are, Elon, going by the conversations you and I have had off the air. But I can't argue with the fact that Holtby has been playing well. He's been playing like about what you'd expect for somebody with his workload. And as long as he keeps doing that, maybe the door doesn't quite open to Jake Ettinger as much as I might want it to. Speaking of regrettable drops, Elon, I had Jonathan Quick earlier in the season. I was feeling so good about it, but I just felt like I couldn't hold the guy because he was trading starts with Cal Peterson, and I already had the Isles tandem, which I also don't want to talk about. But I dropped Jonathan Quick because I'm just like, hey, I can't have a guy who only plays once every 2 games. And, sometimes it works out really well and sometimes it's just kind of meh. But Jonathan Quick has now taken a pretty solid grip on the starter's role in LA, which is not something we were expecting to say going into the season. And the most incredible and surprising Jonathan Quick fact is that he leads all NHL goalies in Delta Fenwick save percentage, and like by a lot. He's pretty much lapping the next highest ranking goalie in Delta Fenwick save percentage, who is Freddie Anderson. So Jonathan Quick, not just playing well, but playing well above what would be expected of any goalie in LA, let alone well above what would be expected of Jonathan Quick from what we've seen over the last few years from him. So way to go, Jonathan Quick. And yes, he is a must roster kind of guy, especially with him taking starts away from Cal Peterson, who is losing them about as much as Jonathan Quick is winning them. And I'm not saying that to take away anything from Jonathan Quick. And then we've got James Reimer, who's just having a bang-up season. I sort of already touched on him as somebody who we haven't been able to count on a lot in the past. But over the last few years, he has been about an average NHL goalie. He's just been really inconsistent. And so it's nice to see him get on a run here in San Jose. I'm curious to see how far it can go. And it's funny, right? Because now we're like, oh, well, James Reimer's doing well. Maybe San Jose's had a defense that can support a goalie all along, which we never totally ruled out, right? But
Come
it's
on,
nice.
You definitely did.
No, I didn't rule out San Jose's defense. I ruled out Martin Jones.
I thought you said they're a bad team. I remember I was like, what if it turns out that Martin Jones was the reason why they were bad? You're like, no, come on, San Jose is bad. We've had that combo.
We have. And I don't think San Jose is great, but hey, maybe they can actually be good enough for a goalie to do as well as James Reimer is doing, although he is playing out of his mind right now with his .936 save percentage, 75% quality start percentage, which is a mark he's like James Reimer has never been a particularly consistent goalie. Over the course of his career, he's just a 52% quality starter. And the best he's ever done is, in small samples, he's been a 60% quality starter, but not often. So it's a great time for James Reimer to be doing well. And my big question for him is, can he keep it up? Which is similar to Braden Holtby and similar to Jonathan Quick. So that's why they're all lumped together here in tier 5. And then Samsonov, I'll just take back to the Luukkonen discussion, which is, hey, we have an up-and-coming goalie who seemed to be boxed out of the role early on or couldn't do anything to win it despite getting a lot of opportunities. Samsonov has this huge pedigree that we're pretty excited about not that long ago. And now he's actually trying to fulfill it. Of course, Vitek Vanacek is getting a couple starts now, and now it's like, oh, well, do we really want Ilia Samsonov after he had a couple bad starts? And we said this on the show, that this was very possible. I won't say likely, but it was very possible that Samsonov wasn't going to be able to put in great starts night in, night out for the rest of the season. He's never shown a great level of consistency yet. He's been more consistent this year, but that door will still open occasionally, I think, to Vitek Vanacek. And hopefully, Elon, you must have an update on how Vanacek is doing tonight.
Still 2-2. So okay. I'll give you another update maybe after the next tier when that game is done. They're in the third. So then we have two goalies here that we didn't want to put in tier 5, but didn't want to put in tier 6. It's like it all depends on health, right? So here's two goalies that I think belong in tier 5 or maybe higher, but it's hard to say until they come back. So that's Mike Smith on Edmonton, who only played 3 games, was great in those games, but he's been hurt. He's apparently skating. Apparently he'll be back soon. Who knows if he ends up pulling a Ben Bishop and plays one game, does badly, and then retires. You never know with these 39-year-old goalies. If Mike Smith is back at full health and he's able to do even close to what he did last year, then he belongs maybe tier 3, right? Maybe tier 2. Who knows? But for now, we'll just put him here in 5.5. And then Carey Price. Same deal, worst team, though, of course, but we'll see. Obviously, Price, last time we saw him, he was dominating the NHL playoffs, but now he's, I don't know, apparently also skating and apparently going to be back soon. Though, Jake Allen hasn't been terrible. We'll get to Allen in just a sec, so maybe I could see it being a 50-50 thing. I think for the Oilers, they're a team that's going for the cup right now, right? And they've been struggling a little lately. If Mike Smith is better, I think they're going to play him, a lot, because the backup options aren't as good. I think for Montreal, there's no point wearing out Carey Price. They're not going to make the playoffs anyways, so why not just go 50-50? So that's why I think I'd have Carey Price lower. But anyways, we have those guys here. It's just 5.5, as we're calling them for now.
Yeah, because we don't know what to make of them and what they'll look like when they come back. With Price, it's the workload, or you have more concerns about Price's workload than I do. I think he'll be able to play as many games as he's ready to play. And I'm hoping by the time he comes back that he feels ready and able and healthy enough to play in the same kind of workload he once had. Yeah, you can't expect a ton from Carey Price, but you can hope for volume and average numbers to go with them. So that would be a good return for Carey Price. And then for Mike Smith, Carey Price, we don't know what his volume is going to be like. Mike Smith, we don't know how his play is going to be. The start of the season like so far. Well, we've barely seen Mike Smith this year. And while he's had a couple good years, which were very unlikely at this stage of his career, he's beaten the odds so far. Now that he's coming back from an injury, it's really hard to predict how he's almost 40, right? He's pushing 40. So how is he going to react? How's his body going to be able to react if he does have to be any different in the style he plays and feels at least the slightest bit of discomfort? So Elon, I'm with you that there is a lot less competition in Edmonton. There's like no competition in Edmonton for starts, but Mike Smith still has to be good, and I'm hoping he can be.
Yeah. Okay. By the way, Vanacek just let in another goal. So all the points now for Samsonov to take over. That was a mistake to play Vanacek for another game, especially since I added him in Cupful for this stream. And now it looks like I'm going to lose my matchup to Marcus. So not a good season for your boy, Brian. Gotta tell you, I'm going to fall to 5-5 now, but no worries. Let's keep on with the show. So what do we got next here? Tier 6. This is a tier of some goalies who are starters, but have been like super disappointing. And then a bunch of tandem guys who it's hard to tell who's going to be the starter. So this is another bit of a mishmash. First, I'll start with the starters, okay? Mackenzie Blackwood is here. We couldn't drop him any lower. Really disappointing season so far. New Jersey's been disappointing. They've had a lot of injuries. A lot of teams have, right? But Blackwood overall, just a .902 save percentage. 5 wins in 16 games. So not great. Another starter who's actually been good lately, I didn't even expect him to be a starter, is Anton Forsberg. But he's kind of taken over, at least for now, as a starter on Ottawa. We thought that it would be Gustafsson. Well, I guess technically we thought it would be Matt Murray. But who really thought that he'd be able to stay healthy? So I thought it was going to be Gustafsson. We talked about this on a recent show, but Forsberg's been good. Like, Ottawa's beaten some really tough competition recently, and it's at least partially thanks to Anton Forsberg. So he's here also in this tier 6 of a starter that we don't have too much faith in, but you got to give him some credit. Then we've got some tandem guys here. So Ullmark and Swayman in Boston, who've both been good, right? Like, Ullmark has a .922 save percentage. I remember at the start people were being like, oh no, what a bust. The Bruins made a big mistake signing him, but he actually has a higher save percentage than Jeremy Swayman, who's at .917 on the season. Of course, a big risk for both of these guys that Tuukka Rask might come back, and who knows what that's going to mean. Maybe we should have had Rask in this tier 5.5. We actually don't even have Rask here in any tier. I just put him down at the bottom just because he's not technically even signed yet, but word is he might sign with the Bruins as soon as he's healthy, and so who knows. So anyway, so that you have Ullmark and Swayman here as like when they play, they're probably good, but who knows how much they'll play. Another tandem is Grubauer and Drieger in Seattle. It looked like it should be just Grubauer as a starter recently, but he just continues to be not great. And Drieger actually, after a couple bad starts to start the year, he's actually been looking okay. I'm just bringing him up now recently. Like, overall, Drieger has 8 games and an .896 save percentage, so that's not good. Why isn't my thing opening? Sorry, one sec. I clicked the link and it's not opening.
It's okay.
It's frozen tools. No, it's okay. Oh, here
it's
it is.
Frozen tools.
Yeah, Drieger. Wait, what was I saying? Overall, okay. Overall, .896 save percentage for Drieger in his 8 games. Recently, because remember, he was down with an injury for a while. He came back, had a really good game against the Sharks, stopping 33 of 34. Then he played against Anaheim for 20 minutes and did not do so well. Then actually, yeah, against Edmonton, he let in 4 goals on 40 shots, which, hard to say if that's good or not. Edmonton's a tough team to defend against sometimes. So I don't know. I think that at this point, Grubauer struggling and Drieger looking okay makes me think that it's a tandem and really hard to predict who to go for. So that's why we just put them both together here in tier 6. And then we have, I guess, a couple other goalies left over that I just also didn't want to drop further, though maybe there's, they're not starters. They're not even in tandems, but we have Semyon Varlamov, just because there is, that great career history recently. Maybe he can fight his way back at some point, though he's been really bad, 900 save percentage. So definitely you could make an argument to just drop him even lower. And then also Jake Allen on Montreal, which again, Brian, I guess you maybe disagree a little bit, but in the end we agreed to put him here. He's been like not great, like overall, if you look at the 903 save percentage in 23 games, but dude's played 23 games. Like, Montreal's been leaning on him. I wonder if he'd have better numbers if he got to rest a little more. He's among the top in saves in the league just because of all the games he plays. So depending on your stats, Allen has been amazing. Of course, Price is coming back, which drops him down, and it's just depends on what Montreal's going to do, and it's really hard to say.
The one thing I can say for Jake Allen is he's the only goalie in this group, in this tier 6 group. I'll name them again: Blackwood, Allmark, Swayman, Allen, Grubauer, Drieger, Varlimov, and Anton Forsberg. Allen is the only one who's outplaying his expected save percentage, which is fantastic. So way to go, Jake Allen. It's crazy that amounts to only a 903 save percentage, and that kind of signifies the struggle that is being a goalie in Montreal this season, who've also been their own special kind of disaster. There have been a lot of disasters in the NHL this year. We had Dallas, we had the Islanders, we had Vancouver, and there's Jake Allen trying to find his way behind a really, really rough team, both offensively and defensively in Montreal. So kudos to Jake Allen for doing that. Elon, you're right. Maybe he has earned a couple extra starts than he otherwise would have seen once Carey Price is back. Although I imagine rest might be first on the docket for Jake Allen once that opportunity comes, because the Habs, ironically, they've had Dustin Tokarski at one point, who has done well elsewhere. They had Charlie Lindgren at one point, who has done well elsewhere. And right now they have no one that can do well in Montreal aside from Jake Allen. So he'll continue to shoulder the load for as long as it takes for Carey Price to return. Looking at the rest of this group, I mean, nobody really jumps out. The Seattle tandem situation between Grubauer and Drieger is interesting just because we thought they were both really good gets, and both have been really bad. Grubauer, I should say, of all regular goalies in the league, is underplaying his expected Fenwick save percentage by the most. And it's not even close. Like I mentioned, Spencer Knight, it's way worse than Spencer Knight, what Philip Grubauer has done so far this season. And how frustrating is that Seattle went out, seemed to break their philosophy for Philip Grubauer, signed him to this big mega contract when they had Chris Drieger and Joey Daccord ready to go. Both guys who may or may not be able to shoulder a number one load, but why not find out? And then Grubauer comes in and fails to do anything near shouldering a number one workload. I don't know, for fantasy purposes, how to manage this. I added Drieger in a couple leagues just to see if he could play well while Grubauer doesn't. Then maybe Drieger sneaks into the 1A position, but Seattle seems really committed to Grubauer. And I'm not even sure if I would buy low on Grubauer for that reason. I want to. I feel like Grubauer is better than we've seen. But I also have seen him be so bad this year. I'm not sure. Elon, do you see Philip Grubauer as a buy low candidate?
No. He was dropped in our keeper league and no one even added him.
Yeah.
So I think that tells you everything you need to know. The thing is, Drieger also has shown us to be really good. So to me, at this point, it seems like a coin flip to me at this point. I think whichever of them is able to play better is going to take the job at this point. I think it would be silly to just keep trying to go back to Grubauer.
And I'll say the same for Allmark and Swayman. Very similar situation, except they're not letting down their team quite as much as Grubauer and Drieger have. But Allmark and Swayman are similarly underplaying their expected Fenwick save percentage. So neither one has really jumped out as being a good goalie this year. I have a hunch that Swayman's the better goalie, but it also seems like Boston has more invested in making Allmark the guy. And keep in mind, Tuukka Rask coming back will knock one of these guys out if that is what ends up happening. Blackwood in New Jersey hasn't been great, even though Jonathan Bernier has been injured and on the shelf for a bunch while Blackwood's been healthy. He hasn't been able to take advantage of it. It was just a 902 save percentage. Not the season we were hoping for from Mackenzie Blackwood. Semyon Varlimov, I'm done with him. He's cost me multiple weeks across several leagues. I'm so frustrated. I was so excited on draft day to have nabbed him in a few leagues. I have Varlimov on the Islanders. This is rock solid. This is what happens when I try and go for a rock solid goalie. The rug has been pulled out from under me with Semyon Varlimov. And then Anton Forsberg is the one I'm curious about. And I'm not curious about if Anton Forsberg is good, because I don't think he is. I'm just curious to see how long he can keep this up. So it's a really fun ride for anybody who did add him. He's got a lot of volume. He's getting a lot of starts. And frankly, this is what I thought we'd see from Philip Gustafsson in a sustainable way. When the door became open for somebody to play a bunch of games in Ottawa, but I did not see it coming that it would be Anton Forsberg. So way to go, Anton Forsberg. Let's see how long he can keep it up.
Okay, and with that, we're done with tier 6, and I think also done with the goalies that you like probably want to have rostered in your league. I guess maybe there'll be one more tier here, tier 7 of goalies that I'm interested in to potentially roster. So let's do this tier. It's like backups that can still potentially steal the starting job and make an impact. So we've mentioned these guys a lot already when we were talking about the starters. So there's 5 goalies here, and those are, first of all, Pavel Francouz in Colorado, who's played 1 game now, didn't go so well, but also he wasn't even scheduled to play until the last minute when Kemper went on the COVID protocol and Colorado like voted to still play the game. Makar was also out. So yeah, you don't want to blame Francouz on that. He was doing really well in the minors in his conditioning stint before he came up. So obviously he has a chance here with how Kemper's kind of struggled. Then we have Jake Ettinger, who I don't know if we have to talk about anymore, but obviously Brian's a big fan of him and like why not? He's been great. 932 save percentage in the 9 games he's played, 6 wins, but just for some reason Bonus has been playing Holtby, but definitely Ettinger would be a very tempting free agent for me if he's available in my leagues, especially as a spot start. Then you just hope that he does well enough to get the next start. Then we have Vitek Vanacek, who we just discussed, who should fall now because he's let me down in a cupful. The game's not over yet, actually, so maybe Washington could come back. But obviously Vanacek's 3 goals against LA is not ideal. My opponent also had Matt Roy, who has 2 assists in this game. How are you letting Matt Roy pass it to people and score on you, Vitek Vanacek? Not nice. Okay, so he's here. So Francouz, Ettinger, Vanacek. They've got Anthony Stolarz, who I definitely did not expect to be here. But I mean, come on. He's been phenomenal, and like especially with John Gibson struggling as of late, and like this isn't the first time that John Gibson has started the year strong and then sort of fallen off, but usually the backup is like just as bad, I guess, or not great. I guess it's been Ryan Miller in past years, but right now it's looking like Stolarz is like good, right? He has a 932 save percentage in his 10 games. He keeps on having good starts whenever he plays. At some point, maybe Anaheim goes closer to 50-50. Who knows? He's someone that I'd be interested in grabbing again for a spot start and see if he eventually gets more. And then finally, of course, we have to consider Charlie Lindgren here, who may be a third stringer on St. Louis, who ends up going to the minors once everyone is healthy, once Husso is back. But on the other hand, there's always that chance that Lindgren could be the new Binnington and take over because he's been the best goalie so far for St. Louis. It's only 5 games, but he's won all 5 of them. 958 save percentage. They put Binnington in today, and he lost. Why not go back to Lindgren for the next game, if there is a next game, anytime in the next couple of weeks? So yeah, that's this tier 7, 5 goalies who all are very intriguing as potential threats to their starters. Francouz, Ettinger, Vanacek, Stolarz, and Lindgren.
Before I dig into these guys, there's been some chat since I spoke about Varlimov about how maybe this is in our YouTube live chat. We have a YouTube channel, Keeping Karlsson. If you listen on YouTube or watch on YouTube, please also download the show from your usual podcasting site. But anyway, the conversation has turned to like the Isles are probably going to figure things out. And I think I touched on this back when we were talking about Sarokin. And hey, if the Isles figure things out, you might want the Varlamov-Sarokin tandem. In a Cats league for rate stats, great. For volume stats, it's really, really tricky and not as fun as it once was. And also, it's like, that's what I was thinking for the first 10 games, 15 games, 20 games. Like the Isles are over 25 games into the season. They're almost 1/3 through the year and they haven't figured it out. I still think they will. I think they're too good and their coaching in the past has been good enough that they're going to figure it out. So if you do want to buy low, like someone's mentioning Grubauer trying to sell, Grubauer for Sarokin in a package, that's amazing if you can somehow add enough to Grubauer. I'm sure Grubauer was not a key part of that trade. But, there is maybe some reason. If rates are all you're looking for, like a good save percentage, Varlamov and Sarokin still have a lot of value. And I think Varlamov still does. I would still hold out hope if it's not going to hurt you, that he's only playing once every 2 nights and that he still hasn't figured out his game. So if you're willing to be patient with the Islanders, they might reward you. But we're in tier 7. That's below the goalies that we've rated below Semyon Varlamov. And we have Francouz, who we've talked about as being an unknown, to have unknown capability of actually challenging for the role in Colorado. And we've seen like Hunter Miska and Jonas Johansson, like it's not a lock to play goalie for the Avs and be good. And Darcy Kemper actually is another example. So we don't want Francouz just because he's starting for the Avalanche. It might be good for wins, but it might not be good for save percentage. Ettinger, yeah, I've shared my optimism that I think he has a shot at challenging and of this tier 7 Francouz, Ettinger, Vanacek, Stolarz, and Lindgren. I think Ettinger has the most upward mobility of this group. I think he could probably jump into tier 6 and even have a shot at tier 5 with like an Ilia Samsonov if he gets on enough of a roll. Of course, first he'll have to play the majority games versus Holtby in a small stretch, and that is hard to picture, which is why he's in tier 7 for now. Vitek Vanacek, I think he'll play 50% of the games max. Anthony Stolarz is interesting in Anaheim because Anaheim has watched John Gibson struggle for a while. And while he is their franchise goalie and he was their team for a handful of years, I'm still I'm really interested to know. It's unfortunate we don't have better coverage out of Anaheim because no one's really seemed to ask or answer the question, what happened to John Gibson and why can't we rely on him? Why can't Anaheim rely on him anymore? Meanwhile, you have Anthony Stolarz, who we mentioned on the show, has bounced around the league for years and has never gotten a solid look. But when he has gotten a game here and there, he's looked pretty good. So I'm curious to see exactly what Stolarz can manage. Like, he's one guy in this group, along with Ettinger, that I think has number one upside in the NHL. I think Ettinger is more likely to be number one goalie and more likely to reach that upside, but Stolarz still kind of unknown exactly how good this guy can be, and it's a little confusing why no team wants to give him much more of a chance, but maybe that chance will be here in Anaheim. And then Lindgren, yeah, I think it's going to be tough for him to convince the Blues to keep him up there, especially when everybody's healthy and ready to go. But it's been fun to watch. And I was watching some analysis, I think from Mike McKenna on Twitter, like the former AHL journeyman goalie turned commentator, who was like, I know Charlie Lindgren. He looks like he's having so much fun. And that's one of the biggest things about, playing well in the NHL is you got to let yourself have fun. So way to go, Charlie Lindgren. See how long you can keep this up, because from what we saw of Lindgren in Montreal, we didn't see even NHL backup quality there. So we'll see if he can do any more for the Blues than he did for the Habs.
Yeah, but okay, let's be fair for a second. Like, that was the same thing that Victor was saying when he was on the show for Short Shifts with Ben. And it's like, yeah, you could look at what Lindgren did on the Habs. That was a super small sample size, to be fair. Like, it's not like he got into a bunch of games. And since then, it's not like Lindgren has just like played those games for the Habs and then just went and rested until it was time to get this opportunity with the Blues. Like, he's been in the AHL, and like this year he has a .925 save percentage in 10 games with the Springfield Thunderbirds. Before that, he wasn't good actually with the Laval Rockets. Maybe it's just like this Montreal organization just wasn't a good fit for Lindgren, and the St. Louis organization is better. Anyway, yeah, we'll see. It's like obviously a bit of a dice roll. It would be really fun to see Lindgren take over in St. Louis and Stolarz. I don't know. All these guys in Tier 7 are kind of interesting. But yeah, I know that you say Ettinger has the best chance, and I don't see why not. I think long-term, especially in a Dynasty League, Ettinger's the one you'd want of this group. But Lindgren, if he's available and you're in like a deep Dynasty League, where goalies are rare, then maybe it's time to grab him, because maybe if not for St. Louis, maybe on some other team. Like maybe he's found his game a little later in his career. Who knows? Nice story so far.
For sure. And I don't want to rule it out or make it sound like, hey, in this really small sample size, Lindgren wasn't good. In this new really small sample size, he's been really good. I like your point, Elon, that there are lots of things that have happened or could have happened between before and now. And we've seen goalies do nothing for, from age 18 to 27 and then suddenly show up and be ready to be a goalie in the NHL or a number one goalie in the NHL. So I'm open to it, Elon. I think it would be fun. I just don't know exactly where he fits on the St. Louis depth chart if they are going to try and give him a longer look than we would have anticipated because of how well he's played.
Yeah, I think it would be Husso going back to the minors, and then it would be him out playing Binnington and taking over, just like Binnington did to Jake Allen all those years ago. Just because it happened once doesn't mean it'll happen again. Okay, so that's it for goalies that I think I have any interest in rostering like long-term and holding, even in deep league. So we've got two tiers here, Tier 8 and Tier 9. I don't know. I'll just tell you all the goalies I have here in Tier 8, and you don't have to comment on all of them, just the ones that interest you. But okay, so we've got here Scott Wedgwood, who I guess technically is Wedgwood a starter in Arizona. Like, he's got 903 save percentage, 4 wins in 16 games. I guess if you need volume, like, you could go Wedgwood or Vejmelka. I don't know. It seems like they'll go 50-50, or maybe Wedgwood has the edge, but, like, honestly, who cares? You've got Koskinen and Skinner in Edmonton, who, like, would be a little bit more interesting, except Mike Smith is coming back. Obviously, if Mike Smith turns out to, stay injured, then maybe you have to move these guys up. Neither has been amazing. Actually, Stuart Skinner, 916 save percentage in his 10 games. He hasn't been terrible, but also Koskinen is going to eat a lot of starts, so it's hard to give either of them too much value at this point. Brossoit on Vegas has been a good backup, and Leonard has struggled, but I don't see Brossoit as like a Stolarz or Vanacek or Lindgren, like someone who has the potential to actually overtake their starter if things break right. Then you have Cal Peterson. We've talked about how surprising it was that Quick has been better than Peterson. But yeah, Peterson, 893 save percentage in 11 games. This is the goalie that LA signed, by the way. It's like, what is it, 3-year, $5 million per year deal? Like, they've got some money locked in on Peterson. So hopefully they can figure out a way to get him back on track, because he's supposed to be their new starter, as like they have all these great prospects. Like, LA is supposed to be a contender in a couple of years, or at least like a playoff contender, right? And so hopefully Peterson gets back, but doesn't look like it's going to happen this year. They're going to lean on Jonathan Quick. Who else do we have here? Aiden Hill, disappointment in San Jose. Martin Jones has been actually better than he was on the Sharks, for whatever that's worth. He's a 907 save percentage in his 11 games. Spencer Knight, we've discussed, big disappointment so far. Antti Ranta has been he's stayed healthy. That's actually pretty impressive. He hasn't been amazing, though. 907 save percentage, 4 wins in 8 games. Mrazek, we've discussed. Then we have Tomas Greiss. Who last year ended the year as one of the top goalies in the league. This year came in total flub. He's at an 893 save percentage. He did have a good game recently on Saturday in the win over New Jersey, though a lot of goalies seem to be able to do well against New Jersey. Before that, Greiss just couldn't put a good game together, so he's still way down here in Tier 8. And then Jonathan Bernier, who again last year also had a really great run when he was on Detroit, and he's been bad this year, and now he's injured. 902 save percentage in 10 games, but who knows? Maybe one day Bernier can step in, because actually Blackwood has struggled himself, like we've discussed. So maybe of all these guys in Tier 8, Bernier is the one who has the best chance, but also just with New Jersey not looking as good as we hoped, and Bernier not looking as good as we hoped, I can't really justify putting him any higher than this.
I agree. I would have liked to see Jonathan Bernier, just because we haven't seen anything from him for a while. He started the season really strong when Blackwood was injured and there was opportunity. And then when Blackwood came back, things became really uneven in Bernier's play, and then he got injured. And so we haven't seen a whole lot of Bernier lately, but I'd like to think he could turn out to be what we wanted Greiss to be when you were talking about Greiss. I could see Bernier landing himself up in the 6th tier with Mackenzie Blackwood. That would be not surprising to me. I think the only other goalie that we haven't really touched on here, in any of the previous tiers that I want to chat about in the 8th tier, is Cal Peterson. And really, I don't have anything to say other than what you said, Elon, which is just that, wow, so surprising that LA seemed finally ready to invest in this guy. And last year we were screaming for him to get more time, and he was barely getting it, even though he was playing so well. And this year they give him more opportunity, and he's having a really tough time. The only thing I can see is that, believe it or not, Cal Peterson, with an 893 save percentage, still outplaying his expected number at 5-on-5. I mentioned earlier in the show that Jonathan Quick is outplaying his own expected save percentage by a greater extent than any goalie in the league is outplaying their expected save percentage. So LA is not doing a great job of protecting either one of these guys. And maybe that's a situation where Jonathan Quick thrives and Cal Peterson is still trying to work his way through, because Cal Peterson has been the better goalie for the last few years compared to Jonathan Quick, albeit in fewer games played than Jonathan Quick. But this has been a pretty surprising turn of events that LA is finally looking like a pretty solid and competitive team. And it's with Jonathan Quick increase and not Cal Peterson. We did not see that one coming.
Yeah, and today it was, like I said, Garrett Sparks in the crease, and Sparks was great. In fact, I streamed in Vanacek. Like I said, if I would have streamed in Sparks, who was also available, of course, I would have won my matchup. But I lost. Sparks 33 saves on 35 shots in the 3-2 win over Washington. So good for him. We'll see if, I guess he's not going to be able to hold that job because LA can't send Peterson down anymore. But yeah, not great when Garrett Sparks is putting up games that you haven't been able to all season. So now let's go to Tier 9, which is our last tier, which is just a bunch of goalies. Some may be good, but no chance to be a starter ever. Mostly bad. So I'll just rip through the names here. So we've got Gustafsson in Ottawa, who, maybe there's some upside. I don't know. It's still Ottawa. Georgiev on the Rangers, who had a decent run when he took over, but now Shesterkin is back, and we talked about how great he is. Vladar in Calgary. He's actually been really good, right? 5 wins in 7 games, 928 save percentage. Maybe there's an argument to put him higher. It's just Markstrom is so clearly the starter. Vladar's not someone you roster, right? He's someone you stream in for a spot start, but no one you consider trading for or adding outside of just a single game. Husso on St. Louis. He's also been good, but now he's potentially 2 goalies back, depending depending on what happens when he is healthy with Lindgren in the picture. Korpisalo on Columbus has been bad. Lankinen, we discussed, really bad on Chicago. Kakkonen, not great. He's had a couple good starts, but Talbot's definitely getting the lion's share, at least for now. DeSmith in Pittsburgh. What do they need DeSmith for when they have Tristan Jari just destroying game in, game out? Elliott on Tampa, obviously, no question. Halak on Vancouver. Clearly, we've discussed Demko is capable and ready to just play all the games. So Halak is there just to be a stopgap. And I guess if there's ever an injury, Vancouver will be happy they signed him, but maybe not because it's not like he's been that great. 905 save percentage overall. Eric Comrie's actually been decent enough in Winnipeg. 914 save percentage, but he's clearly a backup to Halabuck. Jonas Johansson is now on Florida, and they sent Spencer Knight down to the minors. So I don't even know if this is a thing where it's just like for now over the break so that Knight can get some games in, or maybe just Florida's seen what they want to out of Knight. And now they want to just give him, since they're like, going for a cup. Brian, isn't this like probably the case? Like Florida's going for the cup. They're going to lean on Bobrovsky, but they still want Knight to get some experience. So why not send him to the minors? He's still super young, and actually let him be a starting goalie and challenge for his own championship in the AHL. So all that said, it might just be that Jonas Johansson is there to play once every 10 games for the Panthers. And then they could always bring Spencer Knight up if they do want to just give Bobrovsky a break for a game. Sometimes teams do that where they like bring up the backup so that they could bench the starter and then afterwards send the backup back down to the minors. So we might be seeing Jonas Johansson. I'll bet you he doesn't play more than a game or two. 3 more here. Riddick is the backup on Nashville. Hasn't been that great. Aaron Dell and Malcolm Subban. I mean, technically, if Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen gets sent down at some point, they could be like fighting for the starter's job in Buffalo, but they've both been terrible. Like, Subban's only played a couple games, but I don't have any faith in him. So there you go. That's tier 9. Is there any goalie of interest to you here, or is this just the wasteland that I, made it out to be?
I will pick out 2 from this group. The first is Philip Gustafsson. I know that's probably predictable. I said for, talking about Anton Forsberg, I don't think he holds up. I think Philip Gustafsson will be ready one day to be an NHL starter. And I think he's going to get at least one more chance this season to find out if that time will be now for Philip Gustafsson to be a number 1 goalie and basically do a lot of what Forsberg is doing in the crease for Ottawa, but in a sustainable way. And then the other name in tier 9 that I'm keeping an eye on is who we've mentioned him several times already, Ville Husso, with a 927 save percentage and well outplaying his expected number. Husso has been doing really well this season, and I don't see why St. Louis would just send him down to the minors to keep giving Lindgren a chance when Husso has been, by and large, like inconsistent, but still pretty good. So I'll put his name out there. And also just want to shout out Jaro Halak, who, yes, he's only won once in the 7 games he's appeared in and has just a 905 save percentage, but is playing behind that same very difficult team to play behind that Thatcher Demko is, and doing an admirable job of it at his age. So way to go, Jaro Halak.
Good job, Halak. Well, there was that time when he was looking like a really exciting free agent, and then Boston ended up re-signing him, and then he sort of fell off, and now, yeah, he's definitely at the tail end of his career. Kind of like a Ryan Murray, who I brought up. Oh, no, not Ryan Murray. Kind of like a Ryan Miller, in his later years in Anaheim, like a solid enough backup if they needed him, but not someone we ever expect to get a long run ever again. But good career overall, obviously, for Halak. So, Brian, that takes us to the end. I guess, like we said, Tuukka Rask, put him where you want. Like, obviously, if he goes to Boston and takes over as the starter, you shoot him right up the list. But as of now, he's not even signed, so I didn't want to give him too much time. But obviously, someone people should have on their radars. There are some goalies that we had tiered in the original Schmore goalies board that at this point we don't even have in a tier. So maybe as a fun exercise to the listeners, you could try to guess some of them. So pause the pod, think about it. Here are the names, if you're curious. We had, obviously, Hudobin, who's been now sent to the minors, so we don't even have him in a tier. He was not high. We had him in tiers. He was the highest tiered goalie that we ranked, and it's obviously not worked out well for him. We'll see if he ever gets traded. I was surprised that no one grabbed him on waivers. I guess it's just that contract. Matt Murray, obviously, he's in the minors as well. Craig Anderson, who started actually pretty... Craig Anderson has a 921 save percentage in the 6 games he played, but he's been injured ever since. Who knows if we'll even see him again. Then who else did we have? We have Carter Hutton. He was supposed to be the starter on Arizona. I think he might be the worst goalie with an NHL contract right now. Like, he just did really terrible in his 3 games. I think it's almost like lucky for him that he got injured, so he didn't have to just get waived.
Yeah, I'd say it's between Carter Hutton and Malcolm Subban, but it's probably Carter Hutton. Oh no, Sam Montembeault. I mean, you're setting the bar pretty low for being the absolute worst goalie. Aaron Dell's also in the conversation, but yes, for all the goalies who have had enough chances to prove themselves to be an NHLer, Carter Hutton seems to be the worst.
Maybe I should have said like the worst goalie with a contract of over like $1 million. Oh no, Hutton only signed for $750. To be fair, okay, so...
but he keeps getting repeated chances in the NHL, which is kind of different from the other sort of slate of names I mentioned. So I'm with you. If we use that parameter, Carter Hutton definitely is a goalie.
Yeah. Then we had Joseph Kajanash as who we thought would be the backup on Arizona. That obviously didn't work out. And anyways, that's it. That's Schmore Goalies Board. We've talked about a whole lot of goalies. Very interested to hear what people think of our tiers. Again, you can check out what we came up with over at keepingkarlsson.com/goalies. Brian, it's been a real blast talking goals with you, talking fantasy with you. Much more of a blast than actually playing fantasy this past week, which has been brutal. Like, obviously, anyone could just start whining about, like, oh, if only, I got my Mikko Rantanen game in my couple matchup, I'd be the winner. Like, obviously, we've all had some rough weeks. And like you said at the start, Brian, you got to try not to beat yourself up too much. I expected my team to be doing better, and obviously we have excuses to be made, and I think we're going to have this break. Hopefully this COVID situation gets dealt with, and at the end of the day, if the season turns out to be a bit of a wonky season, we could still all have a good time. Like the patrons, and us, we're always still having fun in the Discord, talking about the games going on, lamenting the situation, maybe, guiltily talking about how we're benefiting from this situation when our opponent has a player who goes into the COVID protocol at the worst possible time. So everyone, take care of yourselves, try not to sweat it, but at the same time, like Brian said, start planning for the future, because if the season doesn't get canceled outright, at some point we're going to get back to it, and maybe you'll be able to make some smart moves and sneak your way into the playoffs, even if you're struggling right now, and then surprise in your playoff matchups. And it starts with having good goalies, which is the most impossible thing to predict, but hopefully we've given you something that you can use as a guide to try to give yourself the best chance to win your goalie category. So, okay, Brian, anything else you wanted to say before we go home for the night?
I don't think so. Although maybe, after you just mentioned, like all you said about things being so up in the air and crazy and just trying to look long term, in the short term, just consider, if you haven't already, taking Mason Geertson's advice for Tyler Bertuzzi and get vaccinated.
Sure. Okay. That was really funny. Yeah, that's really funny. All right, so with that, thanks so much for listening. I believe that Ben and Lewis are going to throw out one more short shifts next week, or maybe two. Anyways, it doesn't matter. We don't need to tell you the schedule, because if you're smart, you're just subscribed to the Keeping Karlsson podcast feed, and then you get all the episodes that come at you. I think we have a bonus episode actually scheduled with the Fantasy Hockey Life guys right around New Year's. So we've got some cool stuff coming your way, even if NHL is going to shut down for a little bit. I mean, we know it's going to shut down during the holidays because that's in the schedule, and there's a few games still slated for next week as of now, Sunday night at 9:57. We'll see if those games actually get played. But yeah, stay subscribed to Keeping Karlsson to get all of our content. We really hope that you've been enjoying our shows. If you have any feedback for us, it's the middle of the season, why don't you tweet us at Keeping Karlsson? Give us some feedback. We always love to hear what you have to say. If you like the show and you want to give us some help, you could give us a 5-star review over on Apple Podcasts. That really helps us out. And consider joining our Keeping Karlsson patron community. We just have a lot of fun talking about the games, giving each other advice, some other cool bots in there to keep us all notified of anything important going on. So it's a lot of fun. So if you're interested in becoming a patron, Keeping Karlsson, chatting with Brian and I and all of the cool patrons, Ben and Lewis and Dave, of course, as well, check out keepingkarlsson.com/patron for how to get in on all the fun. But with that, Brian, I'm ready to cue the outro music, and let's go ahead and read us the credits.
All right. This episode of the Keeping Karlsson Fantasy Hockey Podcast was presented by Dauber Hockey and powered by our patrons, including our reliable and super supporters, Flash, Christopher, Andrea, Tom, Derek, David, Rob, and Patty. Thank you for your continued support, and thanks to all the patrons' continued support as we navigate whatever it is that we're navigating right now. Thank you to our Cupful coordinator, Kevin A. Bear, and our team of co-commissioners for keeping things in the kkupfl.com running smoothly. And thanks to Shams Benamor for keeping the amazing stream of fantasy news rolling on at Game Day Lines, at Game Day News NHL, and at Game Day Goalies. Logo art by BrandonWeeb.com. Outro music by Pat Roach. This episode This episode was researched with help from Dobber Hockey, Frozen Tools, Evolving Hockey, Cap Friendly, HockeyGoldies.org, Hockey Reference, and NBC Sports Edge.
For some reason, Brian, you took a breath after every single one of those websites.
Oh, because I was like,
that way?
Well, because I didn't. You want me to do it again? Because I didn't. Funny. I didn't. That was me buying time to see did I actually use it for my list. Okay. I didn't custom write the list for this episode.
Okay. You don't have to take it again.
I can.
Okay, sure. Take it again.
Let me just say the usual list. This episode was researched with help from Dobber Hockey, Frozen Tools, Dobber Prospects, Natural Stat Trick, Evolving Hockey, Cap Friendly, The Athletic, HockeyGoldies.org, Hockey Reference, Hockey Viz, Hockey Database, Elite Prospects, NBC Sports Edge, and Yahoo.
Great job as always, Brian. Thanks so much. Great job as always, Brian. Thanks so much again to the people who joined us for the live show. Really fun chat here going on. So like I said, we've got some short shifts coming. We're going to be taking next Sunday off. I don't think I mentioned that. Though, Brian, we do still have a big show to record next week, and that is our monthly patron cast coming in just 2 days. We're going to be doing a patron cast with the patrons where we answer all the patrons' questions. We already have a lot of fun questions there. If you're a patron, not too late to throw your question in the Discord. If you're not a patron, not too late to become one, and then come hang out for the patron cast and ask us your question. We always have a rule that we're going to answer every single question that comes at us, and I don't believe we've ever broken that rule before, so I'm really looking forward to that in a couple of days. But until then, Brian, what should people do over this holiday season?
Please make sure that fantasy hockey is for everyone.
Bye. Brian, you know who I'm mostly mad at right now? Kyle Connor. He sucks. Like, he doesn't normally suck, but just this week, he had 1.5, 1.5, and 1. Like, he only gave me 4 points in 3 games this week, and I lost by 4.
That's tough when you needed him.
Come on, Kyle Connor. What's going on?
So I have I have a trade on the table.
Okay, let's hear it.
And it's a points-only league with a small bonus for goals. So I have an offer of Kucherov for Connor, and now actually with like the whole NHL shutting down, I'm thinking that offer is like more appealing.
Yeah. What's the latest on Kucherov?
I'm in first. There is no latest. The latest was like maybe he'll start skating and approach a return around Christmas, which is like next week.
So how does this league work? Like, can you put Kucherov in IR, or would you be like down a spot? Like,
I'd be down a spot because like IR, there's like barely IR to begin with, and I'd be down a spot.
Right, but wait, when you say there's, what do you mean? Like, because like you have so many players already injured, that's why you'd be down a spot?
Yeah, even in like here, I'll tell you who's on my IR right now. Who has been on my IR, taking up the spots for the like before everything went totally insane. Vrana and Mike Smith. And I guess that's it, actually.
Well, yeah, Mike Smith is going to come back soon, and Vrana you can drop. So theoretically, you should be able to put Kucherov there.
So
anyway,
let go of, yeah.
I definitely like Kucherov more than Connor, especially in a points-only league. Yeah,
and Connor's not going to play. Like if all cross-border games are canceled, then Connor's not going to play for at least a week.
Go to keepingkarlsson.com/tools. You could already see I've updated the schedule. So Winnipeg does play Dallas on Wednesday. Oh, I guess that's canceled. Oh no, it's gone. Yeah, it's gone. There's no games for Winnipeg next week.
Kucherov, he's still a few weeks away. And John Cooper said he's in the schedule where he should be. Like, that's not helpful.
Yeah, he'll probably come back soon. I don't know. It's a good deal to consider. It's hard to predict injuries, right? Kyle's asking, am I co-managing a team in tier 7? So in the Cupful, I'm a co-manager of a team in every single division just so I could be the commish, but I'm not like an active co-manager. I'm just there so I have the power to do stuff. So I'm not actually co-manager, is the answer your question.
But back to my situation.
Okay. I mean, Kucherov's better than Kyle Connor, right? In terms of points.
Right.
Only.
So I'm trading, like, when's Kyle Connor's next Canadian game?
Okay. The next game for Winnipeg on the schedule now, which obviously can change, is on Monday, the 27th against Minnesota, if that happens.
Right. So I'm trading 2 weeks less of Kucherov. So Kucherov, let's say he comes back in 3 weeks. He's down 2 weeks of games to Kyle Connor. Do you think he makes them up?
Let's say Kyle Connor 75 points pace and Kucherov like 100 points pace.
Yeah.
So I guess you could do the math.
Oh, yeah. I was hoping you'd do the math. That's okay. I can do the math.
You could do that offline, right? Because we're still live, actually. Do you have anything else you want to say to the people watching?
No, that's fine. If anyone has a thought, let me know. I mean, Kyle Connor, like we said earlier this year, like he's found another gear. He's not just a 75-point player. Like he's like an 85, 90-point player.
Can I give a feedback to Kyle Hipwell in the chat? This is a thought. You always write Draisaitl's nickname as Drais, D-R-A-I-S. I've always seen it just Dre without the S.
Dry.
I feel like that's like the more standard Draisaitl short form would be just D-R-A-I. Just a thought. Whenever I see it, I always think it, and I've never said it. So I figured now's a good time to say it.
No one says Dries. Like someone's like, oh, wow, what a play by Dries.
They're like Dr. Dre. Yeah. Anyway,
it's Dry.
Okay, I guess we could end the show here since you're having snacks and we're just like talking about
how Kyle
nonsense
nicknames Draisaitl.
Yeah, so thanks everyone again for coming. Thanks Kyle. Thanks Shane.
James, glad to see you also holding on to Vrana. Good work. We're gonna get there one day.
I mean, I think he's in free agency in our keeper league, Brian. You could always add him now, I believe, if you really believe in him.
No, I traded him to Dave.
Oh yeah, and he has him in his IR? Well, because Dave's not even trying anymore this year.
No, Dave doesn't care.
Cool. See you, everyone. Thanks again. And we'll see you. I guess the next live show that's not for the patrons is not for a couple weeks. So have a great holidays, everyone. But come hang out with the Patron Cast.
And a happy new year.
Yeah, but hope to see you in a couple days at the Patron Cast. Bye.